Harry Potter, Dimensional Wizard. Chapter 351, God's Strength. Eve knew the seal on her was even more troublesome than it appeared on the surface. The wizard sage and Satan ensured that she could not escape. Even if she managed to, she would have to pay the price. They linked the seal to the Eastern spirit world and the afterlife to strengthen it and as a powerful curse. If she ever left Elysium, all the soul energy since the war millions of years ago and all the Shikigamis in the spirit world would turn into a curse that stripped away most of her power. Eve would never accept such an outcome. Unfortunately, she needed Satan's power and the Spade Origin Grimoire to remove that curse. Her original plan was to use Asta and Liba to acquire Satan's body and Zuriel to get the Spade Origin Grimoire. Then, she changed to Edward. Black chains suddenly appeared on Eve's body before breaking one by one. Meanwhile, Edward quickly summoned his grimoire and saw it was glowing. Additionally, he detected a strange aura emanating from his body. "I see," he muttered. He understood that she needed the grimoire and the authority of Underworld's leader to escape. The grimoire was in his possession, and after turning Satan's bones into an undead, he was now the ruler of the Underworld. Furthermore, he also understood that God might have hidden a lot of information about the seal, hence the reason he did discover anything wrong with it. Truly a worthy foe, thought Edward. While God was slowly freeing herself, he was also detecting and removing the spiritual hint inside his mind. Once he finished, his grimoire appeared before him, and he tapped his leg on the ground. Fire-earth magic, volcano apocalypse. The ground cracked as it turned into a volcano. Boom! The entire fourth layer exploded as if a volcano exploded, and Edward appeared on the third layer, shocking the other magic knights. Not long afterward, Eve also appeared on that layer. "My little pond, this is where I created my children." Then, she took a deep breath and inhaled the oxygen and mana in the surroundings. "Is this what freedom feels like?" "You need to leave," said Edward with a stern face. "Maybe we can help you," said Yami. "Listen to me and leave immediately." "Like I would let you." Destruction magic, destruction ball. An enormous purple ball appeared in front of Ever before exploding, annihilating everything in its path. Edward created a shield to protect all the magic knights, buying them enough time to teleport away. Despite his success, Elysium's remaining layers were annihilated by the explosion. He then looked at God. "That spell. You should be familiar with it since it's your creation," replied Eve with a smile. Edward squinted his eyes. "Could it be?" "As you guess. Alan did not survive the ancient war without paying a price. Before he sealed me, I took something precious of him." She waved her hand, and a book appeared, a grimoire with a Joker design on the cover. This part of the Origin Grimoire is the most important. It is connected to all the grimoires in existence since ancient times and thus contains all the spells ever created including the ones you made. When combined with your Origin Grimoire, it allows wizards to use the universe will to create spells tailored to their wills, ideologies, talents, and ambitions. Well, since I also have control of the universe will, the one in your hand is essentially useless. Edward looked at the Joker Grimoire before smiling. He put away his grimoire, and immediately, Eve knew things were about to get serious. Arcane rune spell, meteor summoning. Suddenly, all the people living in both the western and eastern continents saw that the sun had disappeared, and a looming shadow enveloped them. They raised their heads to see an enormous rock descending from the sky. The fear of death suddenly overwhelmed everybody as they knew if that thing hit, the world would end, no species would survive this catastrophe. Eve raised her head to look at the upcoming meteor. She could feel the thing lock her position, so it would follow no matter where she went. So, she used another of Edward's invented spells. Crushing magic, cubing. Suddenly, the enormous meteor the size of a star broke down into billions of Earth cubes the size of a basketball, scattering throughout the world. Edward frowned after seeing this and waved his hand, making the cubes disappear. He pointed his hand and shot out a purple energy blast made of pure mana. Eve created a shield to easily block that attack. But before she could react, she suddenly disappeared. She was no longer floating above the western continent but above an ocean. A parallel timeline? "You're indeed a cold individual," she said before gazing at Edward, who had just appeared. "So, you have no qualms killing the people here." Edward did not say anything since he knew she was correct. Both of them are tier 7, reaching the ceiling of this world. So, an all-out battle would probably do catastrophic damage to the entire world. And if he had to fight while worrying about protecting others, he knew she would take advantage of the situation. The alternative is to use the mirror dimension. However, she could easily escape from there, forcing him to fight in the real world. However, after leaving his timeline, he tasked one of his clones and Morgana to protect that timeline and prevent anyone from entering. Also, navigating the multiverse is much more complex than a mirror dimension. "Alright, let's get this over with," said Eve, who used a gravity spell to levitate the eastern and western continent before throwing them at Edward. Arcane rune spell, intangibility. The continents passed through his body as if he was a phantom. When they landed, they created a massive tsunami that swallowed the entire world. Then, Edward went on the offensive, using a similar method as his opponent. Except he dropped the sun on her. Ever calmly raised her head to look at the falling sun and smiled before blowing casually. In an instant, the sun froze, even the mana core deep inside was not spared. The world was now in complete darkness. Thousands of black arrows appeared above Eve's head, rushing towards her. Really? Anti-magic? Do you think you can defeat me, as the creator of this magic, with my own magic? She raised her hand to create a large sphere of anti-magic to cancel out Edward's attack. Arcane rune spell, time-erasing swords. Dozens of blades with clocks designs on the edges appeared above Eve. She frowned for a moment before creating time bubbles that Julius used for his time magic. She caught the blades and stopped them, but to her slight horror, they appeared faster and faster until she could not keep up. Then, one stabbed through her heart, erasing her time and thus her existence. As Edward watched her disappear, he frowned as he sensed things would not be so simple. And as expected, a few seconds later, a new god appeared before him, perfectly intact. Vanessa's fate-reversing spell, he said. Bingo. You are more of a nuisance than I anticipated. Oh, you have no ideas, as this is just the beginning. Then, Ever opened a portal and disappeared. Edward frowned as he locked on her key and followed her to her destination, another parallel timeline. As soon as he arrived, he sensed something was wrong. After observing the surroundings, he discovered the lack of mana in nature. I see. Using such a spell takes a lot of mana, so she does not want to run out amidst our battle, so she is recharging. Arcane rune spell, mana drain no. Oh. Tiny black holes appeared around Eve, trying to drain her. However, she slashed her hand to create anti-magic slashes that destroyed the black holes. Water creation magic, Water Titan. She controlled all the ocean water to create an enormous entity made entirely from water. Then, the Water Titan raised his hand to crush Edward like a bug. Chapter 352, Eve's Hidden Trump Card. Edward snapped his finger, instantly freezing the Water Titan. At the same time, he multicasted another spell. Heavenly Prison Pillars. 5 massive pillars descended from the sky, surrounding the 2 of them at the center. Then, the top of the pillars connected to form a yellow-gold star. Finally, chains came from the star, trying to bind Eve. Want to seal me, she thought before sneering. She raised her hand to create an anti-magic ball before sending it to the chains. To her surprise, the chain bounced the anti-magic attack before binding it. Fascinating. You surrounded the spell with an aura of anti-magic to defend against anti-magic. Such subtle control, if not done correctly, the anti-magic energy would cancel out your spell, said Eve as she looked at Edward, with her eyes shining with desire. I cannot wait to get my hands on your soul. Boom! She blew herself off. And as expected, her body reappeared a few seconds later, freeing her from the chains. Edward controlled them to attack once again. Eve created a small sun on her palm before throwing it at the chains. Immediately, Edward frowned as she used the same tactic as him by coating her spell with anti-magic. Although her method is easily noticeable and considered shoddy to him, it was still successful. Furthermore, it was excellent for her first attempt. Numerous small pebbles appeared before Edward through matter manipulation. Then, he blessed the pebbles with an infinite acceleration spell. Phew! The pebbles traveled faster than light before piercing Eve's head and even destroying her soul. Phew! 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 More pebbles made her look like a beehive. Unfortunately, she reverted her body to normal less than a second later. However, her face was pale this time. Immediately, Eve controlled a space the size of the 2 continents before condensing them to a glowing black sphere smaller than an egg. Boom! The sphere exploded, creating spatial turbulence that pushed Edward far away despite creating a powerful shield to protect him. Taking this opportunity, Eve teleported to this parallel universe's Elysium and absorbed this version of herself. Then, she controlled all the angels to go on a suicide mission against Edward, who had finally navigated through the spatial turbulence that essentially destroyed this parallel timeline. Enough playing around. Conceptual magic, true death. A black aura emerged from Edward's body, killing everything in its path. Matter, energy, souls, the angels, anything and everything in these parallel timelines. Eve generated a time bubble which created a separated spacetime continuum. She thought by placing her body in another spacetime continuum, this dangerous spell would not be able to touch her. She was wrong. The spell even brought death to time itself. As Edward watched Eve decay and disappear, he was not happy. On the contrary, his cosmic awareness told him danger was approaching. And as expected, Eve reappeared again. Edward frowned as he could tell she did not use Vanessa's fate magic to revive herself. As for the method she used, he quickly analyzed it. You don't have to analyze anything, I'll show you, said Eve. Then, a bunch of phantoms suddenly appeared behind her. At first, it was only a dozen, but it soon grew to 100, 1,000, 10,000, and continued until at least 1,000,000 of them. The odd thing was they all looked the same as her. Could it be, muttered Edward, remembering the assumption he had about her. It's as you think. After analyzing Mother's power, I discovered the multiverse. The first thing I did was contact other versions of myself. We united under the banner of finding a way to transcend this prison. It's a shame the Mother was adamant in keeping us separate, preventing us from meeting directly. But our battle had done enough damage to this world to remove all restrictions. Now, we are united, we are one. They all said the last phrase in an eerie unison as if a hive-mind creature said something with thousands of different and distinctive voices. Edward finally understood why the universe's will of this world was different, capable of borrowing the power of the others from different timelines. It was a response to God's behavior. Despite understanding this, he wanted to curse out loud as his situation had just turned into nightmare mode. Fighting God now is like fighting a million Tier 7 wizard. This was impossible even for him without his floating city or other aid. Without hesitation, he opened his interdimensional space and took out his long staff. It had an ether core on the top that could boost his spell. He sneered before saying, "I will show you the superiority of an arcanist over others' magical paths." Arcane rune spell, Elemental Armageddon. More than 10,000 magic circles appeared in the sky above Edward's head, and from these magic circles came many powerful elemental spells. Light Judgment, Pyroblast, Absolute Zero Ice Spears, Magma Eruption, Earthquake, World-Destroying Tornadoes, Sea God Tsunamis, Lightning Spheres, and Darkness Swallowing. The Eves acted on time to create shields to protect each other. However, dozens of them died. But Edward did not stop attacking. More and more magic circles appeared in the sky, bombarding the Eves non-stop, killing dozens of them after each wave. Despite the appearance of success, Edward did not have it easy. With the number advantage, most of the Eves could go on the offensive while the minority remained on the defensive. So, Edward also suffered tens of thousands of spells, if not more. He flew around to evade, but there were too many of them. So, he would often be hit. Nevertheless, he did not care as he activated his Phoenix bloodline. A white flame would appear on his injuries to heal him. Furthermore, he still had a prototype of the arcane heart to heal him. After a few minutes of non-stop bombardment, Edward realized he would soon be at a disadvantage because of a lack of mana. So, he opened a portal and fled to another parallel timeline. As soon as he arrived, he swallowed all the mana in nature to replenish himself. And not long afterward, the other Eves appeared, and Edward wanted to curse out loud again. In this brief period, the surviving Eves used different methods to revive the dead ones. Although not all of them could be resurrected since many died through Edward's death and time conceptual magic, they still replenished their numbers to a dangerous level. Edward did not waste time and summoned two things. Satan, a Tier 7 undead, and a dozen large cannons. They were the Tier 7 cannons from the world gate that one of his clones fixed. Boom, boom, boom. The cannons began a non-stop bombardment. Adding to that Edward and Satan's attacks, the sky above this world shone brightly before everything ended. The two groups found themselves fighting in the blank realm, the space between parallel dimensions. However, no one cared about this for now. Swish! A spell cut Edward in two, but flames quickly connected the separated part, returning him to his peak. If things continue like this, I won't survive for long, thought Edward as he took a potion that replenished his mana. As he analyzed the situation, he realized it was a matter of time before he ran out of mana, leading to his capture. He never thought he would be in this situation. He decided from now on that he would have more than 100 artifacts that store mana for his use. Not to mention, he will also wear a lot of mana regeneration magical artifacts. It's time to take risks. After making a decision, he took out 5 metallic orbs. He teleported directly into the middle of the Horde of Eve, right in front of the one from his timeline. With a swift motion, he grabbed her and detonated the orbs before opening a portal and entering. After the explosion, a massive gray energy wave annihilated everything in its path, including the Eves. Unfortunately, it also followed Edward through the portal. Damn it, he said as he sealed Eve in his hand and kept opening portals to different parallel universes. Unfortunately, the gray energy turned into a cloud that followed him. And in the process, it would instantly eradicate all timelines it came in contact with. Edward knew how dangerous void energy was, and if he had the slightest contact, he would be a goner. So, he fled as if his life depended on it. He knew the explosion would eventually stop, so he only needed to run until then. So, he would replenish his mana in every timeline before quickly opening a portal to the next one. After jumping over 100 timelines, he finally stopped as the cloud stopped chasing him. With a pale complexion and heavy breathing, he looked around to see if he was safe. Then, he looked at Eve, who had a look of horror on her face. Unlike Edward, she saw with her eyes the horror of that cloud. Edward closed his eyes to connect to his clone. He wanted to make sure his timeline was not affected by the explosion. After receiving a positive answer, he sighed in relief. He did not immediately return home but took a few days to recuperate before returning home. With Eve as his new prisoner and experimental subject, she was more valuable alive. Chapter 353, Project World Stealing. Edward returned to his timeline and was relieved when he saw nothing was wrong. Not long afterward, one of his clones teleported to him. "How is it?" he asked. "I used time magic to revert the destruction on Elysium. Everything is intact. What about that pool? What does it do?" "As long as a person has a pure soul or a lot of positive karma, they can turn into angels. Oddly, I did not find something similar in the underworld, most likely because they no longer control the afterlife. It's a great finding for the Empire, said Edward, who nodded before dismissing the clone and giving him Eve's body. Not long afterward, the other magic knights arrived. Sir, many screamed with joy as they rushed over. Noelle, Charmy, Vanessa, and Asta jumped on him and hugged him. Edward smiled as he reciprocated. Are you all right? Asked Yami, who smoked his cigarette in relief. I'm fine. I'm glad you're all right, said Aesir. I told you guys nothing would happen to him, it's him of all people, said Mirleona. Sister, you were the most worried, said Fugilin. Do you want to fight? Sister, brother, this is not the time, added Leon. ****. I did not expect some individuals could be so powerful. I feel like you deserve the title of God of Magic, said Undine, thinking about the few terrible spells these two used before disappearing. All of you have the opportunity to be this powerful, said Edward as he munched on the cupcake Charmy gave him. You've been saying that for quite some time. I feel like your words are not just mere encouragement, and there are meanings behind them, said Yami. You're right, said Edward, before spending a few minutes telling him about the Empire and the concept of omniversal travel. This would explain why you are such an anomaly, commented Undine. Indeed, many things suddenly make sense now, said Aesir. They've known each for some time now, and he always felt his friend had many secrets. So, some of us can go to the Empire with you, asked Yami. Unfortunately, you don't have much of a choice. Excuse me? I'm going to steal this world. Again, excuse me, he asked as he exhaled the smoke. I'm going to steal this parallel timeline from this universe, then fuse it with my universe, Edward said calmly. I am still confused, said Mirleona, and the others felt the same way. Think of it that way. After I finish, the western and eastern continents will now become another continent on my home planet, Earth. You will become citizens of the Empire, having access to its education, healthcare, social services, etc. You can travel to other planets, meet other races, and experience a plethora of things you've never imagined before. Sir, that sounds great and all, but what about the citizens of the Clover Kingdom? What will happen to them? Asked Fugilian. They will thrive beyond they could imagine in their lifetimes. What do you mean? In my universe, magic is a gift granted by very few individuals. So, the population of wizards is extremely scarce compared to ordinary people. People born no magic like me, asked Asta. Yes, and they are a majority. They must live a painful life. The discrimination in my universe is not as bad as in the Clover Kingdom. Unfortunately, the magically gifted still control the majority of power in the Empire, so I want to level up the playing field. One of my goals in bringing this universe back home is to allow every individual in the Empire to have the gift of magic. How are the citizens going to thrive? Most of them have a meager amount of mana? Are you going to let them use our training method? I've developed a system that allows wizards to grow from no mana like Asta to as powerful as me. Although it is not perfect, things like talent, hard work, and resources play a role in their growth, there is still a clear path to advancement. As strong as you? Or that god? How is that possible? Asked Mirleona. Don't be surprised. I'm not even the most powerful in my universe, not even close. Then, Edward explained the tier system in his world, how he was only tier 7, from the top. We are only tier 5? And only because of your training? Mirleona had a hard time accepting how weak Edward seemed compared to the entire universe. That was a person she looked forward to surpassing. It sounds like a very dangerous place, said Captain Vengeance. No place is truly safe. Plus, I can protect the Empire from any tier 9 threat. And once some of my research is finished, most general tier 10 threats should not be a problem, Edward reassured. Kakik, none of that matters. I cannot believe there are so many powerful wizards. I cannot wait to slice them. Everyone ignored the psychopath. Edward, is this world fusion safe? There won't be any problems, right? Don't worry, this is not my first time. That's good. I'll have to warn Lalapeka to be prepared. There was something else she wanted to discuss, which was the status of the Heart Kingdom Queen in that empire. However, now was not the time for such a discussion. Wizard King, I have a question, Yuno said. Are you wondering about my position? Yes. Asta began to pay attention. I can resign, and the competition for my successor can begin. Or, you can change your goal to be Arcane Emperor, Edward said with a smile, making Yuno squint his eyes. According to the Empire's laws, anyone can challenge the ruling monarch every 100 years for the position. Now that I think about it, the Empire's centennial birthday is coming in a few short decades. Yuno and Asta were not the only ones paying attention to this information. People like Fugilian and Nozel Silva have the dream of becoming the Wizard King, and now, maybe the Arcane Emperor. I want to be both, said Yuno. Me too, yelled Asta. Ambitious, said Edward with a smile. I will announce my resignation as Wizard King. Then, you guys can compete for the position. Are you sure this is wise? Asked Mirleona. I have a lot of work to do before the fusion. So, it will be good to be focused. Edward then chatted with the group for a while before dismissing everyone except for Yami. I found your sister in the eastern continent, Noelle Co. Yami paused for a moment. She's not dead? No, she has been searching for you all these years. I see, he said. Then, tears began to fall from his eyes. I thought she was gone. I thought they were all gone. Regrettably, I could not find your family's soul in the afterlife. So, they have likely already turned into energy to power up the seal. I could use time magic to try to retrieve them. But, even then, I doubt I would succeed. It's fine. I've already accepted their death. Now that I have my sister, I'm satisfied. Do you want to meet her now? Now? I'm totally not ready. If she saw my appearance, she would be disappointed, especially since I'm 24 and not married yet. Then, this is the perfect opportunity to confess your feeling for Charlotte. That poor girl has been pining after you for too long. At this point, it's embarrassing. Charlotte, huh? Yami did learn of her feelings for him during the training. But, given the upcoming battle, he did not want to address them. Maybe, you're right. Edward patted his shoulder before leaving. He went to see Undine and Lalapeka to address their concerns. He told them that the Empire did not grant nobility status, so her status would change after the fusion. The Heart Kingdom is as big as some large countries on Earth. Even so, countries are now considered regions of the Empire, so she will become the region mayor of the Heart Kingdom. Furthermore, her position has a term limit where she could not be re-elected for the same region more than twice. Undine was not happy with this outcome as she wanted at least more than 2 terms. However, Lalapeka said she was alright with this outcome as long as her people were happy and lived fulfilling lives. And Edward promised her that. After this meeting, Edward went to see the elves, who were concerned about this fusion. He reassured them that the Empire was multiracial, multi-species, and multi-ethnicities, so the elves would not be discriminated against by humans or other races for that matter. He then proceeded to inform the dwarves of this news. Their reception was the most exciting. These adventurous angry dwarves were the happiest about the concept of traveling to another universe and interacting with others. Finally, Edward returned home, and the next day, he communicated with the citizens and announced his resignation. Chapter 354, Leaving Black Clover. The news shocked the citizens as they wondered if something was wrong. After all, the Wizard King was in his prime and one of the most powerful wizards in existence. So, why the sudden resignation? However, in his address, Edward gave some reasons that he wanted to live a peaceful life now that the world was safe. He also promised that no matter what, he would still be the kingdom's protector. After that, he oversaw the competition for his successor. After the Elysium invasion, the participants all received merits to raise their ranks. Asta and Yuno finally became Grand Knights and had the status to compete for the position. Finally, a battle between Yuno, Asta, Fugilian, and Nozel took place for the position. In the end, Yuno was the final winner. In the final competition with Asta, he displayed the ability to revert mana into anti-magic, defeating his opponent. However, right before his coronation, someone from the Spade Kingdom came to see him, and they convinced him to return as the ruler. So, Asta, as the runner-up of this fight, was the one crowned as Wizard King. However, they promised to compete for the position of Arcane Emperor, thus not ending their rivalry. During the peaceful transfer of power, Edward secretly released the news of the fusion to prepare the citizens beforehand. And as expected, many people were unhappy about suddenly changing their environment, especially the nobles who worried about their status. Edward did not care about them. So, after helping Asta settle in, he disappeared in the eyes of the public to focus on his research, especially on Project World Stealing. There are too many things that could go wrong, he said to Morgana. With each calculation, I find more problems, she complained. Are you sure we have to use void energy? If you want to preserve the fundamental rules of this universe, when we separate this timeline, space-time spells will not work. We have to use void energy. The fundamental rules of this universe are the main reason he wanted to steal this world. It is the reason that every single individual born in this world has mana inside their body. So, he must preserve them at all costs. Too many things could go wrong if the void energy is not properly controlled, said Edward as he overviewed the spell he would use to detach this timeline from the entire Black Clover universe. Our best option is to try with different timelines to gather data. Once we perfect the spell, we can proceed with our timeline. That's a good idea, but it will take too much time. We have nothing but time. Normally, that would be the case. But I'm worried about Vivi back home. It's true that anything could happen back home with the Death God catastrophe. However, if there were a problem, Empress Olivier would have contacted you. She can be stubborn, so I'm worried she won't call for help unless the situation is truly dire. Furthermore, you know our omniversal communication method is not ideal. Who knows what could go wrong? Morgan frowned. They can only communicate through the soul dimension since her central server is back in the Empire. However, sending information across the void is still tricky, and complications could arise. Do you have another way? Let's cheat, said Edward. Old man Merlin, I need your help. The world seemed to pause for a brief moment before an older man with a long white beard appeared in the underground laboratory. It actually works, said Edward as he looked at the visitor. It's not as much of a big deal as you think, said Merlin. Oh, how so? Names have power, and so this saying applies to powerful beings. You're now tier 7, so you should get a true name once you return home. True name? Is it like what I think? Yes. After you reach Tier 12, you can sense anyone who mentions your name from all the worlds you have traveled. Don't mention these for now. Why did you call me? Edward then explained his plan before handing him the data and spell he created to steal the world. Merlin looked at it for a few seconds before modifying and adding other stuff. Edward looked at the changes and lips twitch. There were so many errors he made that he was speechless. Furthermore, there were so many things that even Morgana did not calculate. Thanks. No problem. Now that I'm here, I have a few things to say. You have missed a great opportunity. What do you mean? You could have won that fight against Eve. Although it would have been challenging, you could have won. It was the perfect time to push yourself to the limit and sublimate your willpower to the 8th scale between life and death. Edward frowned slightly after hearing this. I know your personality is cautious, you like stability and only take calculated risks, but you have to understand that in many situations, facing things head-on, even when the odds are stacked against you, is the only way. Edward pondered for a few minutes. You're right. As long as you understand. One last warning, do not rely too heavily on void energy. At Tier 12, it becomes relatively useless. Merlin said his goodbye before disappearing. Did you feel he was different today? Are you referring to his criticism of you? Asked Morgana. No, not that, he's always been like that. I felt like the current him seemed in a rush. And, I somehow could not get the thought into of my mind that he was slightly weaker than usual. I have no proof for this, but I have a feeling that I'm right. Weaker? Could he be injured? Edward squinted his eyes. If even someone like Merlin were injured, then the situation of the war must have gotten serious. So, he needed to hurry. It seems we need to start going to more powerful worlds and challenge ourselves. Otherwise, we might be useless in the upcoming battle. Edward felt that once he reached Tier 12, he would start getting in contact with this war. So, he needed to challenge himself and even place himself in danger, if needed, to prepare for the future. Alright, let's get to work. Edward then focused on his research, creating a few clones to help him with other projects. The main ones were the Karma Empowerment research and finding the resources to repair the World Gate. As for other research like Project Perfect Tier 11, he knew these were long-term and could not be achieved in a short time. Luckily, he had Eve's method of controlling more than 1 million variants of herself as a foundation to work on. Time passed quickly, and 5 years went by. During this time, Edward found a way to store mana inside his soul, so the journey to Tier 8 would be shortened. His other research, like the Arcane Heart, was also successful, and he had already modified his heart to be similar to a devil, granting him incredible generative abilities. It's a shame that only Tier 5 Arcanists can condense an Arcane Heart, unless they condense a Devil Heart, which had no limit on tiers. However, he discovered that Devil Hearts would slowly corrupt the soul. As for the modification Merlin did to the spell, he finally analyzed and understood them. As a result, his understanding of void energy was elevated, and he had no problem with the 3.0 update of the floating city. His research on Karma Empowerment was the only failure in the past 5 years. With the angels, devils, and Eve, he figured out how these creatures could use positive and negative karma as a boost. However, he could not replicate the method unless he fundamentally changed his soul. He did come up with a surgery that could do such, but he was not happy since it was not easily replicable. Furthermore, he did not want to mess up his soul. So, he left for the future. Finally, today was the day he left. He first went to see the people he knew on the Western continent before checking on his clone on the Eastern continent. The latter's mission was a success as he was now the ruling monarch of a new dynasty. Furthermore, the clone had now educated the Eastern continent in many modern concepts that would make them easier to integrate into the empire. Moreover, the clone also released rumors of the fusion to prepare the citizen. Then, Edward floated above the sky, took out his staff, and cast a spell. Numerous runes appeared in the sky, making everybody on both continents watch in awe. Somehow, they knew the day had arrived. After the runes manifested, a phantom gray cloud appeared above the sky, covering the sun. No one knew how dangerous that cloud was except for Edward. He focused intensely on controlling the void energy to separate this timeline. Although he had practiced countless times before, he still took things seriously. He knew the slightest error would result in this entire parallel dimension being wiped out. Luckily, things went smoothly, like the practice runs. He separated this timeline from the infinite numbers while preserving its fundamental laws. The universe will try to stop him, but he used the complete origin scripture and his willpower to stop it, then kept this timeline in a pocket dimension that manifests itself in the form of a crystal orb. As he held the object in his hand, he could see an entire world inside. However, the people of Black Clover only felt the world tremble slightly, then the runes on the sky disappeared, and nothing else occurred. The sky was still as blue as yesterday, the sun shone like it always does, and the clouds floated as if they were the freest things in existence. Many people even wondered if the process failed. Edward smiled before contacting a few people and reassuring them. Then, he hopped on the now-fixed world gate and headed to the Konosuba world. Chapter 355, Reunion. Edward carefully placed the sphere containing the Black Clover world before heading toward his next direction. He did not have to go to the Star Trek world since he received a message from Olivier that the clone took a world gate and returned home on their own. So, Edward decided to go straight to Konosuba. Morgana, let's test the new travel system. In the past few years, Edward finally completed Rowena's research for using void energy to travel in the void. Starting the void core engine, said Morgana as a holographic screen appeared in front of her. A few seconds later, she said, everything seems normal so far. Let's begin the launch. She instructed the void energy in the core engine to take them to their destination, and it did so. Whoosh! The gate disappeared before reappearing, traveling an unquantifiable distance. Did we succeed? Asked Edward. Let me check, replied Morgana as she tapped on the keyboards floating on her. Our calibration was off. We are now 3 days away from the Konosuba world. 3 days? How long would the journey normally take? With the floating city, 3 months. With the world gate, 5 years. A significant improve, but the technology has a long way to go. His desire is that he can travel to any world from his memories by instructing void energy. However, so far, he can only go to places he has the coordinate to, and he still did not instantly arrive at his destination. Did you find the errors we made? Yes, I've identified the problem, and there should be no problem fixing them before we return home. Alright, I'll leave it to you. Let's descend. The world gate entered invisible mode before entering the world. Immediately afterward, Morgana picked up a signal from the floating city, so she locked on its position and directly teleported to its location. Edward found himself on top of a castle. After sensing the position of the floating city and the others, he finally descended. Someone jumped on him as soon as he exited before suffocating him with a pair of soft things. I would gladly die like this, said Edward with a muffled voice. Fleur finally let him go. I miss you. I miss you too, he replied while holding her. Already tier 7? It seems you guys benefited greatly from this trip. We did all right, answered Fleur with a smile. Where are the others? Before Fleur could respond, the others walked out of the room. What's wrong with you two? Asked Edward after seeing the disheveled states of Hermione and Lily. They had heavy bags under their eyelids as if they had not slept for long. Not sleeping for dozens of years is not a problem with their strength. So, their situation could only be explained by stress and pressure. They did this to themselves, said Fleur while gloating. What happened? Lily suddenly got competitive and wanted to finish her research before you arrived. Apparently, this began because of an argument with Snape. As for Hermione, she got into something above her weight class. Lily and Hermione gave her a dangerous stare, but she did not care. Hermione got into Edward's arm, taking a comfortable rest, she snuggled him like he was a giant teddy bear. Alright, let's talk inside. The group walked inside before talking about their experience. Edward spent almost 50 years in the Black Clover world, so his story was quite long. However, only 10 years had passed for this group, so their story was briefer than theirs. Something tells me your experience was not normal, said Hermione. Old Merlin probably chose that timeline to test me. Apparently, I disappoint him in the final result. Are you alright? I'm fine, but I should follow his advice. We need to prepare in advance for the worst. I see. So, where is Phileas? After defeating the Demon King, he became a bard for a while before we send them to the other dimensions under the god's control, replied Fleur. Oh, what are they like? They are essentially the other Ice-Sky worlds that you often mentioned from primordial Earth. So, this world is a combination of many Ice-Sky worlds? And the gods are responsible for sending people from Earth into these worlds? Basically. Edward nodded before saying to Lily and Hermione, you two need some sleep. Indeed, muttered Lily before leaving with Snape. Then, Edward tucked Hermione into bed before spending some family time with Fleur. He was amazed as her succubus bloodline seemed to have evolved, granting her some ability that brought him to Cloud 9. Then, after Hermione rested properly, she joined in on the fun. The couple did not leave their bedrooms for the next week. Finally, Edward walked into Hermione's lab to see her research. She handed him the data while explaining. In the past few years, I've managed to recreate Konosuba's magic system. I can recreate them all, whether it is the adventure card, the job class bloodline, the skill points, or others. Edward looked at the data. She created a pocket dimension for her experiment and modified it to be similar to the Konosuba world. Clones were then sent to change class and level up, and they succeeded. Karma empowerment too, thought Edward. So, what's the problem? The problem is after discovering the other dimensions. I've since realized that the limit of my modification was only tier 3. No matter what I did, I could not raise the ceiling of this world. The other dimensions have a higher ceiling? I found a dimension with a power ceiling of tier 6, and they used karma empowerment or karma energy as well in the form of a system you often see in Ice-Sky. So, you've tried to recreate the system and failed? Basically, and it's driving me crazy since I succeeded with Konosuba. To be fair, Konosuba's system is a knockoff version. They do not have status window like in the others and must rely on the adventure card, said Fleur. Hermione glanced at her and decided to ignore her. I thought the problem was the energy level of the dimension. So, I expanded its size and inserted a lot more mana. but it was useless. Then, I thought the problem was I needed more karma. So, I developed an enchantment to gather karma from the people of Earth and added it to the dimension. This plan did show signs of removing the limit, but it still failed in the end, and I cannot find why. What is the difference between the Konosuba dimension and the others, besides the ceiling level? He asked. There are many, but the main one is the others do not require a bloodline for different job classes. If someone meets the stats and levels requirements or only does a specific quest, they can change class. Furthermore, there are some dimensions where the concept of class is non-existent. With enough skill points, you can learn any techniques or spells. So, what do you think? Do you have a solution? Hermione found karma energy fascinating. It's quite the versatile power, with the ability to increase stats with no repercussion, and allows individuals to instantly master knowledge and use it as if they were reflexes. If such a power were used wisely, the Empire's overall strength would grow at an alarming rate. So, she wanted to succeed. Edward did not answer her but looked through the data, analyzing everything. He also studied karma, so he was knowledgeable in the subject. A few minutes later, he said, "What you need is karma authority to serve as the core of the dimension." Authority? Yes. With the karma authority, you can modify the dimension similar to law manipulation power. You establish the rules and boundaries of that dimension. How much karma can a person receive after killing a creature, how much is required to level up, what can skill points be used, and what is the highest level, etc. I've brought a group of creatures, devils and angels who can naturally generate positive and negative karma. They would be perfect for reinforcing the dimension and making it operate smoother. Devil and angel, muttered Hermione, her eyes lit up as she figured out something. The same role that the gods and devils of this world plays, calm. Exactly. Your idea is good and all, but I do not meet the willpower requirement to use conceptual magic. So, how am I going to access authority? Have you really become stupid? Said Fleur. You can cast a weapon like the Time and Death Staff. Hermione slapped her forehead. How could I forget this? It's really not good to work while sleep-deprived. Alright, let's get started on designing this thing. Let's call it Karma Staff. No, that's too basic, but let's use it for now. While talking to herself, she began to type something, ignoring these two. She also scheduled some sleeping time for herself. She did not want to return to the previous state. So, how is your research? Asked Edward. Excellent. And I might have found a way to complete Project Dragon God. Chapter 356, Research Update. Fleur displayed her data to Edward before she continued to explain. You know, we've been struggling to recreate the other Dragon King's bloodline, most likely because they are alive. However, after studying the bloodline of an ancient dragon in this world, I found many subtle differences that may be the result of the different laws of the universe. So, I plan to use these differences to create a new set of Dragon King bloodline before fusing them. And I've already got some success. Edward looked at the data. Fleur had already recreated the Fire Dragon King by combining the bloodline of the Konosuba's ancient dragon and Harry Potter's regular fire dragon. She also researched the dragons in the other dimensions and added them to her research. She even compared the complexity of the Dragon Fire King's bloodline to the Albion's Thunder Dragon King bloodline and the Water Dragon King bloodline back in the Empire. And so far, there were no problems, especially in terms of potential. The Dragon God project is Edward's possible way of reaching Tier 12, so he paid great attention to the final result. So, what do you think? There is no detectable issue as of now, replied Edward. The only problem is the dragon race's inherited memories and dragon chant magic. The Neo-Fire Dragon King can pass down its magic through inherited memory, but it has no access to the memories from our universe. I've taught him how to use dragon chant, and he quickly mastered it since the magic is tailored for his kind. However, since we do not know all the dragon chant's knowledge, I don't know its limitation. Edward did not answer her. Instead, he frowned as he analyzed the data deeper. If you're worried about that, we could probably find a way for the Neo-Fire Dragon King to replace the one in our universe and access the Dragon Clan's inheritance. Well, maybe not replace, but trick whatever system they use to access that knowledge. Great idea, but this is not what I'm worried about. You overlooked something. Oh, what is it? We know the Dragon Kings can reincarnate after they die. As long as another dragon in the universe has a bloodline pure enough, they will inherit the title, memories, and powers of the Dragon King, essentially replacing the dead one. Your Neo-Fire Dragon King is missing that aspect in his bloodline. Fleur looked at the hologram, focusing on the part he pointed out. You're right. However, isn't that a good thing? We don't want the old Dragon Kings to use our creations to reincarnate. The Neo-Dragon King has an extremely pure bloodline on par with the old ones, so they are the perfect vessel for reincarnation. Your worries are not unfounded. But, it would be best if our Neo-Dragon Kings had a similar but separate reincarnation system. That way, once one of them dies, we do not have to spend a lot of time and resources to recreate them. That's a good idea. I'll work on that. Now that she had a direction for her work, Fleur was extra motivated. Then, she suddenly remembered something and said, Don't forget to go meet your new wife. I have a new wife? Of course, whiz. But you have to woo her. Edward gave her a strange look while looking at Hermione through his side eye. After seeing no reaction, he calmly nodded without saying much. By the way, how many women did you bring this time? Asked Fleur, while Hermione also secretly listened in the corner. None. Really? I don't think you're that well behaved. Hee, there were a few meaningless flings. I guess I can't say they were meaningless, happy memories, more likely. As for meaningful connections? Only one, but things did not work out. Oh, did the mighty arcane emperor get his heart broken? Said Fleur as she pinched his face. Edward pushed her hand away. I'm not that fragile. Honestly speaking, are you okay? She asked as she caressed his hair. It's not my first rejection, and it won't be my last. That's a good mindset to have. Alright, I have to go back to my research. Edward nodded before walking to Lily's lab, where she waited for him. Before entering, he saw Severus waiting at the door, signaling him with his head, to which Edward nodded back to indicate he understood. So, he sat in front of her. What's going on? Why don't you want my help? Honestly, the situation has nothing to do with you. I was talking with Severus about the trouble I was having in my research, and he told me to take my time. And if I could not succeed, you would help once you arrived. And for some reason, I suddenly snapped at him, we argued, and I wanted to prove him wrong by finishing the project before you arrived. I see. Did you find the real cause of your trouble? Asked Edward. After you arrived, I activated my tower spirit, psychoanalysis mode, and discovered my outburst resulted from some problems back home. James? Yes. Apparently, I have some subconscious guilt about how I treated him. And when Severus said these words, I burst out and lashed out. Things are better now. So, what will you do when you return? Asked Edward. Couple therapy. The three of us must go to therapy to figure this marriage out. Otherwise. That's a good idea. Nevertheless, you should talk to Snape, he's worried about you. Yes, I do owe him an apology. I'll talk to him. Edward nodded before sighing. Now that we are on the topic of apology, I would also like to take this opportunity to apologize again for my actions regarding James. There is no need for that, as I understood your behavior. Nevertheless, I still appreciate your understanding and forgiveness. Lily smiled and nodded. Alright, show me your research. Lily displayed the hologram projection to show him the data while explaining some things. I've reproduced most of the capability of the divine spark and even made some optimization. She then showed him a design of the arcane spark she designed. The arcane spark can turn faith into mana. And unlike the divine spark, where the conversion is only temporary, this one is permanent. So, arcanists can have another way to rapidly increase their mana through faith. A new magical path could even begin with this method. Edward frowned after hearing this. He had never been a true fan of the whole concept of godhood and faith. If arcanists walk the path of faith, then it is only a matter of time before the universe reverts to its former self once he overthrows the gods, even if faith was never poisonous to the soul. What's the situation about the faith? According to our study, the limit of purification that the sparks provide is tier 7. After that, there are signs of contamination. Edward read the research's date. The group captured the most powerful god in heaven and the devil lord ruling the underworld. Both were tier 7 and had an organ similar to the divine spark. The heaven ruler absorbed faith, while the devil lord absorbed negative emotions. Their sparks can purify faith and negative emotions, but only to a limit. At their tier, their souls have already displayed some signs of corruption. Any idea on how to fix the issue? Yes, I plan to combine the spark with the divine flame to enhance the purification process. Excellent idea. What else? I've replicated most of the divine spark's abilities except for the method to use karma empowerment. In our battle with these two rulers, they used a sacred spell that reached tier 8. We would have been in serious danger if not for the floating city. Lily showed the data to him. In her research, she created different tiers clones before using some of Hermione's research to transfer positive and negative karma onto these clones. Then, she had them create their own arcane speak and use sacred spells. The tier 1, tier 3 clones could use sacred spells to cast a spell one tier higher than themselves. However, the arcane spark no longer functioned from tier 4 to higher. The sacred spells could boost the spell's strength, but it could not reach one tier higher as the heaven ruler could. Edward's eyes lit up after seeing this research. The angels and devil in black clover could also use their karma to slightly boost their spells. And they could do it because of the difference in their souls. In contrast, the gods in this world can do it because of the divine spark. Immediately, Edward began to combine the two research. He modified the arcane spark to temporarily modify an arcanist's soul frequency to be similar to the Konosuba gods or devils, thus allowing them to use their karma and the perfect sacred spell. That should work, said Lily as she looked at the design changes. Edward then sends her his research on devils and angels. You can experiment on them independently to finish the design. Devils and angels? I wonder how these devils are different from this world, muttered Lily as she gathered the data of both species to compare. Meanwhile, Edward saw she was deep in focus, so he left. He did not forget to signal Snape that he could enter. Edward wanted to spend a little more time with his wives, but they ignored him on the account that they were busy. So, he finally went to meet Wiz. Chapter 357, Date. Edward followed directions to the magic shops. He opened the door, and he heard a melodious voice welcome him. However, the voice abruptly stopped, and the owner looked at him with her mouth open. "You're real?" asked Wiz. "Why wouldn't I be real?" he asked, perplexed. "Fleur has been talking about you for so many years, but you never showed. So, I thought you were not real, and they just invented your existence." "And why would they invent a husband?" Edward asked, intrigued by her thought patterns. Wiz smiled in embarrassment. "I thought they were part of some cult similar to the Axis Church, and they wanted to trick me into it. Fleur did tell me you were distant lately." However, she was too busy with her research to pay attention. "This explains everything," replied Edward. "As you can see, I am real and not the leader of a cult. Yes. You're even more handsome than in the pictures I saw." "Thank you, but I have to say, you're not how I imagined you to be." "Oh, what did you imagine?" "A little shyer." "Haha, these days are past me." "Of course, maturity comes with age, after all," said Edward. "That's a great way to explain aging. Come in, I'll serve tea." Edward nodded before taking a seat. Soon afterward, Wiz served tea, and he observed her. He could tell she now had a magic core and was currently a tier 6 undead. He could even see she could not reach tier 7 because the main ingredient for the purification potion was Aqua's spell. And as an undead, Wiz cannot use it. "If you don't mind me being direct, are you still interested in me? And what if I am? Then, I will take you on a date." "A date, huh? I have not been in one of those since I was a teenager." Wiz looked Edward directly in the eyes. She was now in her early 30s and had never dated someone since her teenage years. Even though she thought this man was not real, some of her wanted to wait to see him. Now that she had seen him, she felt many emotions: happiness, indifference, expectation, and anger. Many of them were contradictory, but that was how she felt. "Very well, I accept your invitation." "Excellent," said Edward with a smile. "Do you want to know where we are going, or do you want to be surprised?" "Surprised me. All right, I will come to pick you up tomorrow at noon." "So, early? We have a lot of places to go." "Now, you got my expectations up." "Hopefully, I won't disappoint," Edward replied before drinking his tea and saying goodbye to her. The next day, Edward showed up, dressed casually. "Yesterday, I forgot to ask what is the dressing code," said Wiz. "We are mages, I don't think we need to worry much about the dress code." "That's true. So, where are we going?" "I've traveled to every inch of this world. So, it's not easy to surprise me." Edward waved his hand to open a portal behind him. "After you." Wiz entered, and he followed. Immediately afterward, she found herself in a strange environment. There were tall buildings made of metal, fully encased in glass. There were moving chariots but with no magical animals carrying them, nor did she sense magic behind use. Wiz could see many people walking and traveling, everyone seemed busy while focusing on a strange object in their hands. "Is this Kazuma's world?" "Yes. I've heard Fleur said you were sad once Kazuma left and often mentioned you wanted to visit him and his world." "It's been 10 years, Wiz said softly. After Phileas led a group of adventurers to defeat the Demon King in his castle, Aqua wanted to return to heaven, while Kazuma wished to return to his life back on Earth. The gods granted him his request. Megumin left with him since they had fallen in love, but Darkness remained to take care of her father and inherit the title. As such, the band of misfits disbanded. So, what happens to that group? Aqua has been sneaking into the mortal world to see Kazuma and Megumin. She often used her power to allow the four to communicate despite the laws of heaven forbidding it. Didn't she get in trouble? Not anymore. His team now secretly controls heaven and hell, as such, they can make the rules. "Let's go. We have many places to visit." Then, the two visited the city, experiencing a different culture. Edward served as Wiz's guide as they went to different restaurants worldwide, watched a movie, went to park rides, etc. Edward would jump back in time to make the day longer so they had enough time to experience what they wanted. He did not even care about messing with the fabric of the space-time continuum. And with their godlike stamina, no one was tired. Finally, at night, the two used magic to change to a fancy dress as they ate at a luxurious restaurant. Edward taught the chefs how to use magical beasts as ingredients to suit Wiz's taste. "I feel like I know plenty about you. At the same time, I feel like I know nothing," said Wiz. "What do you want to know?" "I promise to answer to the best of my ability." "What made you want to become a wizard? Why the intense desire to pursue knowledge and the truth? Give me a real answer." Edward took a moment to recollect. "If you want to get to the root of it, you'll have to go back to my childhood." "Now, I'm intrigued." "My situation was similar to Kazuma. I was born in a world without magic, but after death, I got a chance to reincarnate in a magical world." Wiz swirled her wine before taking a sip, paying close attention. "Even before my reincarnation, I was a curious child. Unlike most kids, I loved reading. I had a library full of books on different subjects. I was the type of kid that could give a presentation on the different types of dinosaurs at a moment's notice. However, everything changed after entering high school. I got bullied for being a nerd or something." Wiz understood the anti-intellectualism in many places in Kazuma's world, so she understood why he would be bullied. At first, I did not mind since I had great friends, supportive parents, even got a girlfriend, continued Edward. However, she soon broke up with me. She said she was tired of hearing me talk about astrophysics and other boring subjects. That was the last straw. What happened next? Edward smiled. I changed. I fit society's standard of what was cool. I no longer talked about what I love. Instead, I played sports and became athletic. You played football, didn't you? Said Wiz. I did. Quarterback? No, I was the running back. I was pretty good too. I became popular and dated beautiful cheerleaders. You can say my womanizing ways began during that time. But as you can expect, I was not happy. I could not remember how many times I've looked at the stars, pondering about the mysteries of the universe, wondering how wonderful it would be if I could be born in the future so I could know the answers to all my questions. So, did you finally revert to your old self? Continue pursuing your passion for knowledge? No, that only happened later during university. Although my grades were terrible by the time I graduated, I could still attend a good university with a football scholarship. Then, I met her. I should have figured it was a woman who changed you back, Wiz said while rolling her eyes. I'm ashamed to say, but you're right. Throughout my first year of college, she changed my life. She allowed me to be myself. And when I suddenly went on a tangent about the influence of 17th-century gay occultists on Eastern European religion, she listened. She did not call me names, thought I was boring, or made me feel bad for knowing such a thing. She would ask questions, engage in the conversation, and use the opportunity to learn. What's more, she would go out of her way to learn on the subject so we could discuss the topic. She sounds like a wonderful person. So, what happened? Did you miss her after you died? Chapter 358, His Past/In Young Arcanist. Unfortunately, our relationship ended before that, said Edward while reminiscing. Oh, what happened? Problems begin in our relationship earlier because of her parents. They were filthy rich, and I was not. After I got a double PhD in astrophysics and mathematics, I focused on my teaching job at the university. At the same, we also began to talk about marriage. However, I had to meet her parents more often, and the issue of our social status was often brought up. Although she did not mind and was even willing to cut off ties with her family, I could not let it go. In the end, the pressure of my new job and my insecurities resulted in me ending the relationship. You, as an educator? I could never imagine. I love teaching and sharing knowledge, always have. Fleur did mention that as one of your good qualities. However, thinking about your current wealth, it's hard to imagine you would lose the love of your life because of it. Love of my life? That's going a bit too far, isn't it? It seems you are filling a hole in your heart with countless women. A better explanation would be that I'm a lustful man, replied Edward with a chuckle. Or, the one I like the most, my capacity to love is so big that one person is not enough to bear it. Whatever helps you sleep at night, said Wiz as she swirled her wine before taking a sip and savoring the taste. So, what happens next? I'm guessing it's when you die. You're correct. I died and reincarnated in a world that was essentially a novel I once read as a child. That's possible? Well, things are a little more complicated than stated, but that's the gist. Wiz nodded and did not press on the subject. After my reincarnation, I was at first elated. After all, this was a world of magic. I could not wait to find its mysteries and essence, to discover all its mysteries. To this day, I can still remember the excitement I felt after learning the news. It was the same excitement as when I read my first book and felt a veil removed from my mind as I peer into the secret of the universe. Edward paused with a pure smile on his face. Unfortunately, the happiness did not last long. They never do they? Edward sighed as he also took a sip of his drink. I quickly learned that I was reincarnated in a tumultuous period of the book. As for my parents? They were minor characters that did not survive. Moreover, my extraordinary magic talent could put me in grave danger. Wiz listened attentively without saying anything. I tried everything possible to prevent their death, but it was futile. I remember the day my aunt brought me the news, the sadness, despair, and helplessness I felt. Despite having memories of my past life and being a grown man in a child's body, I loved my parents with all my heart. To this day, I do not know whether it was because they treated me with the utmost love and care or the result of my reincarnation. I supposed it does not matter. What mattered was how devastated I felt after their loss. It was so bad that I entered a deep state of depression. Edward paused as he took a more relaxed position in his seat, with his shoulder more relaxed. Now that I think about it, this was truly a terrifying time. Both loneliness and hatred were slowly consuming me. If I did not get out of it, with my talents for magic, the world would truly have suffered at my hands. Wiz trembled slightly at the thought. Over the past years, she had heard of this man's legendary tales and accomplishments. And in the past few days, she saw his ability as he played with time like it was nothing. If such a person became evil, the threat he would pose to the world would make the Demon King from Axel look like a joke. So, what brought you out of that dark place? It was my aunt. I remember her exact word, magic is capable of creating miracles including reviving the dead. Those are dangerous words. Indeed. However, she later told me she only said these words to redirect my focus on something else, and she never expected me to succeed. According to her, she was waiting for the right time to talk to me about it. Is something wrong? I just started wondering if she is why I started walking on the path of human experimentation and pushing the boundaries of magic. Well, is she? Probably not. With my curiosity, it was only a matter of time before I started studying dark magic. And without the laws of my past life restricting my morality and having so much power, I think it was inevitable. It is very concerning if you need laws to restrict your morality. I'm very aware of this, said Edward as he shrugged his shoulder. What don't you tell me about you, now? Your story is not finished. There is nothing more to add. I studied magic, found a way to revive my parents, and became ambitious and lustful in my desire for more knowledge. So, I created an interstellar empire full of powerful and talented wizards to help me study more knowledge and discover the truths of the universe. Wiz was speechless at how this man summarized his achievements as if he was speaking about doing something as common as taking a nap. All right, you win, she said. As for myself, my story is not nearly as interesting as yours. I was born in a small town near the Belzerd kingdom. One day, the demon army destroyed our town. Although my family survived, I saw the atrocities that the demons created. So, I became an adventurer. Luckily, I was pretty talented in magic and soon became famous. They called the Ice Queen because of my mastery of ice magic and cruelty against the demons. Those were the good old days, she said with a beautiful smile. In one of my adventures in a dungeon, my companions were cursed. And the only way I could save them was by becoming a lich, so I accepted the offer from one of the demon generals, Vonir. After that, I made a deal with the demon king to maintain the barrier to his castle in exchange for his army not arming innocent people. Then, I opened my magic shop. Thinking of her magic shop, Wiz was slightly embarrassed. After so many years, even though she has grown and changed, she has read countless books, but her business acumen is still terrible. To this day, the store still barely makes some money, especially after Vonir disappeared for quite some time. It would have run out of business long ago if it were not for his return and helping with the store. Edward smiled at her shyness. Then, they continued talking and getting to know each other. They spent the next 3 months together, traveling the world and even visiting other planets. Finally, Edward brought her to his laboratory. Is this why you asked me for my blood? Wiz asked as she looked at the naked body in a green tank that looked exactly like her. Yes, a perfect clone that fits your soul. With it, you will no longer be a lich. Well, we still need to tweak your soul before the real transformation is complete. Wiz's transformation was not done by the power of authority, like the undead back home. So, Edward could fix her soul with his death staff. I thought you wanted me to be your undead empress for political reasons and stuff? There is no need for your help integrating the undead into the empire. But my existence would make it easier, correct? Edward frowned slightly. I thought you would want to return to normal. There are many downsides to being a lich. The body's temperature is always low, most foods taste horrible, the inability to have children, the inability to dream or sleep, which can be an upside to some people, and the social stigmas of being an undead. Of course, there is the upside, power, eternal youth, and immortality. I did in the past. But, after leaving so long as one, I have accepted my identity, it is now a part of me. I see. In that case, let's use the original plan I had for you. Edward led her to another room before showing her a hologram with a bunch of data. The plan I draw for you is to use the duality of the soul to allow you to be both a necromancer and a paladin, an undead and an angel. The good part of your soul will now control light or holy magic. At the same time, the evil part will control negative energy or necromancy. A young arcanist, thought Edward before internally shaking his head and focusing on the task at hand. Typically, I should have created an artificial soul for you to control the second but contradictory attribute. However, your soul is unique. You are a pure and morally good person, always protecting the innocent. At the same time, you also have a wrathful side when facing your enemy. So, your soul is perfect for this procedure. So, I will no longer be afraid of purification or holy magic? Yes. On the contrary, you will be a master of it, FWOE. Oh, is this dangerous? Not when I'm doing it. Plus, I have many fail-safes in case something goes wrong. Alright, I trust you. In that case, let's begin. Chapter 359, Return Home. Wiz had all white clothes, similar to a patient about to have surgery. Edward stood beside her, prepared to put a mask on her face. However, he saw the slight worry or fear in her eyes, so he stopped. Are you alright? Just a little worried. If you want, we can postpone things. No, I'm ready. He placed the mask on the side and held her hands. Remember, I'm next to you. With me here, you don't have to worry about anything? Wiz held and caressed his surprisingly rough hands, and somehow, she felt reassured. I trust you, she declared with a pure smile. Edward caressed her head before putting the mask on her face and laying her on the metal bed. Then, a large glass tube covered her body before a green liquid filled the tube. Edward took his staff and used his willpower to force the universe will to grant him access to Death Authority. Then, numerous runes appeared on the surface of the glass, and Edward's eyes glowed all white. He now could see Wiz's soul inside her soul dimension. Morgana, inject the serum. Then, a black liquid was injected into Wiz's body from the mask placed on her face. This was a serum made from the bodies of God and Satan from black clover. It would modify Wiz's life code to contain both the positive attribute of angels while also boosting her lich body and the negative side. So, for the next few minutes, he watched her shake incessantly during the transformation. Morgana monitored all her changes on an atomic level to ensure nothing went wrong. Once the conversion finished, he proceeded to the next step, the soul mutation. Wiz's soul, who typically looked like herself in her dimension, began to change. She shone brightly in two colors, dark and gold. Edward monitored her carefully during the process. Everything the dark spot overtook the gold one, he would use his staff to revert to the balanced state, and the same for the gold area. He would also ensure that the mutual transformation of the two lights did not damage her soul or the dimension. The process lasted for a few hours before it ended. Then, the two lights fused with her soul's eyes, turning one side pure dark and the other pure gold. Success, thought Edward with relief. Then, he checked the soul space, the connection of the soul and the body, the bloodline, and many other things to ensure no problem. After not finding anything, he finally ended the surgery. He ordered Morgana to give Wiz plenty of healing potions for her health while gathering data on this procedure. Then, he woke her up. At first, Wiz was confused, but she quickly regained her bearing. "How do you feel?" asked Edward. "Different. Different good, or different bad?" "I don't know," she replied as she looked at her hand. She then placed it on the metal surgical table she had previously laid. Purification. A white light came from her, and the silver table instantly turned black. "Is this the power of Archpriestess? But why did it turn black?" "The table is made of a magical ore. Your spell purified both the mana inside and the metal, essentially optimizing it." He walked to the table and easily removed a piece of it. "Unfortunately, you purified it too much, so it's now a useless ore." Wiz nodded before raising her hand to cast another spell. Undead summoning. A knight in dark gold armor appeared before her, holding his head in his hand. The knight immediately knelt to salute her. "How fascinating. I have both the power of Lich and an archpriest." After that, Wiz proceeded to test the limit of her power while Edward recorded everything. He even discovered that when it came to purification magic, she was as talented as Aqua. After the successful transition, Wiz began her magical studies. In the past 10 years, the group only gave her some basic knowledge about the Empire and magic in case things did not work out with Edward. Now that she was officially one of them, she had much to learn. As for Edward, he had to focus on Lily's research. Using it, he created an arcane spark on his soul dimension that looked like a dark gold crystal floating at the center of the dimension. "Let's test this thing out," he muttered before using the world gate to teleport to a desolate star system. Sacred spell, star explosion. Thousands of runes appeared around him, and from them manifested an enormous sun. Then, it exploded, destroying the entire star system with it. Luckily, Edward teleported away in time. After all, although his attack reached Tier 8 star system level, he was still a Tier 7 star level and would not survive the explosion. "The amount of my karma used is not as big as I expected." He then proceeded to use the same attack, but this time he used his negative karma to cast a sacred spell. The destructive power of negative karma is at least 20% higher. "I'm guessing there is also a bonus for healing spells when using positive karma." Edward frowned as he could see the potential danger of the arcane spark. He did not doubt many people would not hesitate to commit heinous crimes to gather negative karma and increase their power. This will be a significant problem since it only requires Tier 4 country level to cast an arcane spark. It did not mean that arcanists could use sacred spells as easily as they desired since their souls would not be able to bear power a whole tier above them. Most people will only be capable of using 1 to 2 sacred spells before tiring out. Nevertheless, he had to restrict the arcane spark to prevent a sudden increase in crime in the Empire. Then, there is also the issue of faith. The arcana spark can convert faith into mana, allowing people to reach higher tiers quickly. So, he did not doubt that many people would want to leave the Empire to conquer planets and other places, subjugate these people and force them to worship these arcanists as gods to increase their tier. As such, he decided to release 2 versions to the public. The first version only allowed people to use their karma for sacred spells. However, strict contacts will be signed to ensure these people will not actively commit crimes to increase their karma. The second version is the full version with the faith conversion ability, but even stricter contracts will be required to get their hands on this method. Although Edward will not ban faith in the Empire, they will be severely controlled. After making some preparations, he left. There was nothing more left for him in this world, so it was time to return home. Before leaving, he plundered heavens, hell, the gods, the devils, and all the dimensions these places controlled and had access to, including Axel. Subsequently, he plundered the population of Earth, including Kazuma and Megumin. Of course, he did not immediately leave. No, he traveled the multiverse to parallel dimensions where the population differed from the one he came from. Then, he would plunder the entire population, as he did in his previous world. He did that numerous times until the universe will acted and exiled him from the universe. So, Edward placed the floating city inside the world gate before heading home. The floating city required a lot of time to upgrade to the new Void Core engine, and he did not want to wait. Furthermore, he wanted to update it in one go instead of piece by piece. The 3.0 version should have the ability to fight against Tier 10 universal powerhouses. Morgana, how is it? The calibration for the Void Core engine is still off. We are one day travel away from home. Edward was still satisfied since we cut a trip that would take a few months to one day. 24 later, he could overlook his home world's crystal wall. Chapter 360, The Undead Legion Catastrophe. Chatia Cluster, Bluewater Star System, 24,000 light-years from Earth, Blue Sea Planet. A beautiful woman held a trident in her hand. She had blue skin, 6 hands, and the lower body of a serpent. She was a Naga. To be precise, the Naga Queen, Aquafina. Behind her was a large army of her kind, clad in armor. The only difference was that the ordinary Naga had 4 arms, 2 less than her. In front of them was an army of undead composed of underwater creatures like mermaids, sirens, krakens, and even her kind. Water Tornado. Aquafina pointed her trident to create a powerful tornado that swept half of the army. Regrettably, only a few of the undead remained motionless after her attacks. The others got up and continued attacking despite many parts of their bodies being destroyed by the sheer force of the attack. Damn it. My water purification is too limited, thought Aquafina. Attack, she yelled to the people behind her, and the group of Naga began their offensive. First, they drank a potion before the majority of them swam to the enemy and confronted them with their weapons. Every time a Naga killed an undead, their weapons would shine with a weird light, preventing the undead from rising again. It permanently killed them. Meanwhile, the Naga mages stood behind the queen, took out a bunch of scrolls, and injected their mana inside to activate them. Numerous spells landed on the undead legion, instantly killing many of them. The mages continued the attack until all the scrolls ran out. Then, they used water-based spells to deal with the enemies. Unfortunately, this time, they would rise even after their entire body was destroyed. Aquafina acted swiftly and used her water purification magic to finish them off. So, the Naga's tactic became the mages weakening the enemy, and the queen finished them off. The battle lasted hours before a strange noise came from the undead side, making them retreat. As Aquafina watched them leave, she did not chase them. Instead, she looked at one of her ministers and said, "Go count the casualties." After that, she swam to the ocean's surface at an incredible speed. In less than 10 seconds, she swam from the near bottom of the sea to the surface before flying in the air. In the sky, she gazed at the entire planet. Blue Sea Planet was a beautiful planet with 95% of water. But now, 90% of the entire ocean was a deep black. She has lived for thousands of years and ruled her people for hundreds of years. And ever since she could remember, this planet was pure blue. Her late parents would take her on vacation to this place, allowing her to make many fond memories. But now, the entire ocean was polluted by undead energy, making it inhabitable to the living. Aquafina sighed deeply before returning to the bottom. Upon arrival, the minister gave her a list, and she perused it. The casualties were high. Luckily, this group has the Arcane Empire's undead protection potion. Otherwise, her fallen kind would also have turned into an undead. Have the citizens been loaded to the ships? Yes. As you wish, Your Majesty. Aquafina walked to an area full of dozens of enormous wooden ships the size of any spaceship. She got on one and gave the order. Then, these wooden ships floated on the surface for a few seconds before flying in the air. A giant pool of water appeared on their bottom to carry them in the air. Then, they flew outside of the planet's atmosphere. All the passengers had a bubble around their heads to allow them to breathe. And due to their natural physiology, that was all the protection they needed. Your Majesty, do you want to destroy the planet? Said one of the ministers. Indeed. It is better than to leave it to the undead. Aquafina was the only Tier 6 planetary individual of the Naga, so she was capable of blowing the planet to smothering. No need. The ministers seemed to have thought of something, so a look of understanding and loss appeared on their faces. One of them opened his mouth to say something but closed it in the end. Aquafina led her people to another planet in the star system. It was truly a beautiful sight to see such enormous wooden ships traveling in space at tremendous speed, carried by controlled ocean waves. Unfortunately, no one was in the mood to enjoy such a sight. After a few minutes of travel, the ships arrived at planet Blue Nobility, the Naga race's main planet. Blue Nobility was made up mostly of water with a continent in the middle. The Naga royal family modified the continent by placing a giant bubble full of water inside it, recreating the ocean. Only the royal family, the nobility, and wealthy Nagas could live on the continent. After arriving, Aquafina headed to her throne room while her minister went to locate the surviving members under the sea. Aquafina spent a few hours on the throne, alone with her thoughts. Then, an assembly took place with all the ministers that served her. How is the situation? She calmly asked. Not good, Your Majesty. Blue nobility is the last remaining planet of our star system, and our defense won't last long. Furthermore, we are running out of the Arcane Empire's purification scrolls or the undead protection potions. Do we have money to buy any more? Unfortunately, even with their wartime discount, we do not have enough money to sustain another large-scale invasion. The room became quiet, only the sound of light breathing echoing. I guess we really have no choice, said Aquafina with a sigh. Your Majesty, please don't, said one of the ministers as he coiled his snake's lower body, which was a sign of bowing down, similar to kneeling or kowtowing. It is obvious that the Arcane Empire is using this war to force many races and factions to integrate into them. We can't fail for their tricks, CM. So, do you have a better solution? Aquafina calmly asked, and the minister did not know how to answer. In the current situation of the galaxy, all the most influential civilizations are in crumble except for the Arcane Empire. If they don't accept their rule, the only thing left for the Naga is destruction at the hands of the Undead Legion. We can become a wandering civilization. As long as we survive long enough until forces outside of the galaxy intervene, we can maintain our race, said the minister. Aquafina internally shook her head. To become a wandering civilization, they would have to either move their entire planet, travel throughout the galaxy, or use spaceships to lead the people. However, each side had many uncontrollable problems, including pirates and slave catchers and the lack of resources to maintain such a lifestyle. I have decided, we will surrender to the Arcane Empire. The minister who rejected clenched his teeth but did exit his coiling position as a form of protest. Aquafina gave a slight nod to a person standing in the corner of the room. The other minister who saw this nod knew what it meant. This minister would not live past tonight. The queen did not want any uncontrollable factors affecting the Naga race's integration into the Arcane Empire. Someone walked over to hand Aquafina a stone. After activating it, a holographic screen appeared as she logged into the universe web. During this catastrophe, most communication methods became ineffective, most likely the doing of the death god. However, the universe web was not affected, which gave many people hope that outside help would come. But after so long, nothing happened. Aquafina contacted the Arcane Empire and contacted them with her notice of surrendering. Before sending the message, she hesitated. Her decision was not rash or out of nowhere. She did it because the Arcane Empire is a multiracial one. Even though the leader is a human, the Empire's laws are fair and equal to all species. The thing is that they are so fair that they have begun to integrate undead into their folds, which worries her. Her kind has suffered too much at the hands of the undead, and she did not know how to feel about this. I have no choice. Plus, the Empire's law is that anyone can be a ruler if they defeat the previous emperor. After re-strengthening her resolve, she sent the message. A few minutes later, a space fleet teleported outside of her blue nobility planet, and Aquafina went to receive them. Chapter 361, Blue Water Start System. Aquafina watched as a small pod flew from the fleet outside the planet. The pod landed in front of her castle, and not long afterward, a few people came out. The leading convoy was a mermaid with dark skin and red hair. Two people followed behind her, one tall and one extremely short, similar to a child in height. Aquafina recognized the tall one as a human, and the short one was a species called free elves. The two followers did not have any protection despite being underwater. She could tell that their magical robe provided them with an invisible protective shield so they could survive in this environment. Furthermore, these three were all Tier 6 Arcanists. Your Majesty, said Ariel. My name is Ariel Mertail, and these are my companions, Tongyu and Kabi. There is no need for politeness. After all, after today, I no longer will be royalty. But currently, you are still of noble lineage, so respect is a must, replied Ariel. And although Aquafina knew this was because of a diplomatic mission, she was in a much better mood for her decision. Do you want to enter for some tea? I believe this is a common custom of your empire. Oh, normally, we would love to, but the current situation does not allow it. So, let's get to business. I understand. Tongyu took out a long scroll and handed it to Ariel, who then gave it to Aquafina. The infamous contract of surrender, said Aquafina as she skimmed through it. Then, she condensed a quill with her mana to sign it. Your Majesty, should you be more careful, said one of the ministers. No need. Since we are going to integrate into the Empire, we should have some level of mutual trust, Aquafina replied as she signed her name before dropping some blood on the scroll and leaving some imprints of her soul. The contract then lit up after the signing process. Thank you for your trust, said Ariel with a beautiful smile as she took the scroll and placed it inside her interdimensional ring. It's my understanding that you have a way to purify the death energy of our planets? Your Majesty, you don't have to worry. We will deal with the rest. Now, if you could please tell us the general situation? Aquafina then gave the situation of the undead on the other planets. Bluewater Star System has 4 habitable planets where the Nagas once lived and prospered. However, 3 of them have already been conquered. 3 barren vampires? That's Tier 6, muttered Ariel. Alright, we will deal with them. Do you mind if I accompany you? Asked Aquafina. I would love to see the Empire into action. Very well. Awkwafina then followed the squad into the pod despite the rejection of her ministers. Then, they flew to one of the largest ships in the fleet. Ariel conducted a meeting and allowed the former queen to participate. However, she did not immediately attend. Instead, she went to a particular room on the ship and placed the contract before recording a message. This is Ariel Marail, security code 7R084773882H649 due, reporting to HQ. The mission has been successful. Then, a few seconds later, the scroll disappeared as it was teleported away, making Ariel sigh in relief. A few times, the contracts of surrender were intercepted, creating political problems. So, the new security protocol is to immediately teleport them back to HQ instead of transporting them through a long voyage. After receiving a message from HQ, Ariel went to the meeting room. "How is the situation?" she asked as soon as she entered. "We have already blocked the entire star system's space to prevent reinforcements from the Undead Legion, not that they would care about lowly Baron Vampire," replied Tongyu. "Our sensors have detected an energy signature which signals that the undead is indeed tier 6 and not hiding their strengths for an ambush." Ariel nodded before looking at another person in the room. That person was wearing a unique magical hood that hid all information about them. "According to my divination, there is nothing wrong with this regiment. It's just one of the many normal ones sent out to cause chaos and increase the number of undead." "All right," replied Ariel calmly. Awkwafina was not calm and had to exercise extreme control to hide her emotions. After all, she had just learned that a regular regiment almost destroyed her race and ended her kingdom. It was not fair, yet she understood the cruelty of the universe was as such. The strong preyed on the weak. "My mission is finished," said the hooded figure. "And according to wartime emergency order, I will excuse myself." Ariel nodded. In the current war, diviners have become essential to gather accurate information. As such, they faced constant assassination from the Undead Legion. There is even a secret squad under the death god Guznad, dedicated to killing diviners of the most influential civilizations. The Starskin race suffered the most under this squad since they have even more diviners than the Empire. And, Nightskin race will now refer to as Starskin. And after the Empire suffered a few successful assassinations, new protocols were established to ensure the safety of diviners. They will wear magical robes that hide their identity and will not stay long in any active war zones. After giving the information, the hooded figure went to a special room that directly teleported them back home. "Then, let's begin," said Ariel. The fleet then separated into 3, each heading to a different planet. She took Awkwafina to Blue Sea Planet, where a black shield surrounded the entire planet. Ariel ordered the ship cannons to bombard the ship, and after firing a few rounds, the shield popped like a balloon. Then, a magic circle appeared underneath her feet, surrounding her and Awkwafina. They disappeared and appeared on the only piece of land on the planet. "Damn the Arcane Empire," said a cold voice. It was a pale man with 4 long fangs dressed like a nobleman from the Middle Age. Numerous dark lights entered his body from different places on this planet. "Trying to absorb the souls of the other undead to become stronger," said Ariel with a smirk. She raised her hand to cast a spell. A magic circle appeared with weird writings on the corner. The writing was composed of Sanskrit, ancient Egyptian, and other languages. Undead purification. This was a spell Edward created based on the Book of the Dead, the Golden Book of Amura, and the Oracle from his previous voyage. After Ariel cast her spell, the souls of these undeads, mostly skeletons, flew from their bodies and entered the underworld, and their physical bodies became useless. "Damn it, I cannot die here," yelled the vampire. Once he saw the Arcane Empire's ships, he wanted to use this method to raise his tier quickly. But the transformation was not as simple as he thought. Blood tentacles. Countless blood tentacles came from his body and headed straight for Ariel, trying to turn her into a shish kebab. "Don't you know better to confront an Arcanist at the same tier?" she said with a sneer. A magic circle appeared before her, creating a powerful jet of flame that turned the blood tentacles into ashes. Ariel then raised her head to see a bunch of bats flowing into the sky and used another spell. Lightning Judgment. A pillar of thunder descended from the sky on all the bats. Then, the vampire's complete body fell to the ground with smoke on his body. He wanted to curse these Arcanists and whoever created that system. All of them were powerful and could use powerful spells without pausing. They were strong physically and masters of hand-to-hand combat. Then there was the fact they were not restricted by any attributes and could use all types of magic. This was something even the undead could not do. Ariel snapped her finger, and the vampire passed out. "Envious," she said, looking at Awkwafina. "Honestly, I am. Such a powerful and versatile magic system." As a water creature like herself, Ariel should only be able to use water magic unless she had some special bloodline, a mutation, or used magical artifacts. But that was not the case. "You will also be like me after you integrate into the Empire. I can learn your magic system despite being a foreigner?" "There is no foreigner in the Empire, only its citizen. After the final integration, you can go to school to learn our magic system at no cost. Then, you can innovate to make it better and push its boundaries, creating a cycle of progress." Awkwafina paused for a moment. That sounds beautiful and all, but can the Empire be so selfless? To give away such a precious thing. She could not fathom doing such a thing despite knowing the benefit. The Naga royal family has hidden its most powerful spells and magical artifacts for thousands of years. And even though she loved her people and would do anything to protect them, she was also selfish and wanted her family to have the power to rule. This is the charm of the Arcane Emperor, replied Ariel. Alright, let's deal with the other mess. Then, she looked at the dark ocean. She used a spell to scan the entire planet. Ariel then cast a large-scale spell. Countless magic circles appeared in the sky, covering the entire planet. Then, countless water bubbles flew from the bottom of the ocean. There were so many of them that the sun was almost covered. Are those undead? Replied Ariel. What's going to happen to them? They will be sent to a facility that will awaken their intelligence and past memories before turning into undead. The successful one will be integrated into the Empire as citizens, while the others will be purified. Is it really alright for undeads to be treated as citizens? Asked Awkwafina. I know you have your prejudice, but you have to understand most of them were ordinary people before they were forced into this state. Many of them have now become our allies and are now fighting on many battlefields across the galaxy. Their contributions to this war are no less than any other race or civilization. Furthermore, there is still the hope that the Empire will find a way to revert them to their former selves. What about the vampire? What's going to happen to him? According to the Empire's laws, he is my personal property now. So, I can do what I please with him. Awkwafina sighed but no longer commented. Meanwhile, Ariel contacted the ship. Come get the undead. Plus, send in the druids to purify this place. Not long afterward, the ship descended on the planet and began to load the captured undead into a spacious pocket dimension inside the spaceship. At the same time, a bunch of arcanists dressed in clothes with a nature theme also arrived. They flew around the ocean while dropping seeds. Once they finished, they chanted a spell that echoed throughout the planet. As they chant, enormous white trees began to grow from the bottom of the ocean. Then, the tree rapidly turned dark, and they did so, and the ocean slowly returned to its blue color. A few hours later, the dark sea had returned to its original color, and Awkwafina rushed to check. As she played with the water, she could no longer sense any death energy, and she did not need to protect herself when interacting with the water. It's really purified, she muttered. The process will be complete in another few days, but it is good enough for now, said one of the druids. Is there anything I need to help with? No. Someone will come to take the trees away a few days later. All right. The druids then entered the ship to depart. Their services were needed throughout the galaxy, and they could not spend all their time on one planet. Although they would love to stay and listen to the thanks of the planet will, they had a mission to preserve nature in many other places. Chapter 362, HQ. Solar System, Pluto, HQ Headquarters. Oliver was in a room full of people with many screens in front of her. She was dressed in a typical general uniform with medals. However, she did not wear it appropriately, showing her neck. Strangely, she had a bunch of green veins that looked like worms under her beautiful skin. Commander, we received a notice of surrender from the Naga race in the Blue Water System. Send an envoy to accept their surrender. Make sure there is no problem, diplomatic-wise, and clean up the undead there, Olivier replied. After saying these words, she closed one of the dozens of screens to concentrate on something else. Each screen consisted of a live confrontation of the war, and she needed to pay close attention. Suddenly, one of her screens went dark. She immediately contacted the battalion responsible for that particular battlefield. Commander, we have lost Point Star System, so I ordered a retreat, said Captain Tanaka. I request reinforcement before trying again. Send me the casualty report, said Oliver calmly. She then reviewed the report. Captain Tanaka led a medium fleet of more than 100 ships, but half of them were destroyed by one of an undead squadron, killing countless soldiers and arcanists. There is no need for reinforcement. We will abandon Point Star System for now. Commander, as long as I have a few more ships, I guarantee to reverse the situation. I do not doubt your capability, Captain Tanaka. After all, the enemy had at least 3 times the number of ships, and your order of retreat was correct. However, Point Star System is not a priority at the current stage, so there is no point in losing more manpower to acquire it. I see, replied Tanaka while secretly clenching his hand. He knew with how competitive the military was currently, his defeat would derail his career. And without the opportunity to undo this shame, he also could not live with himself. After all, his men counted on him. Nevertheless, he obeyed his command. After closing the communication, Olivier focused on another screen that needed her attention. Commander, we have detected 2 first generals, said an officer. Olivier quickly checked the location. First general meant that a Tier 8 undead had appeared, so she needed to act soon. Leaf Tree Star System and Red Number Star System. We will send troops to Red Number Star System as soon as possible. What about Leaf Tree? That's the elf's territory. Let them deal with it, Oliver replied calmly. Red Number Star was very close to the Empire's border, less than 3,000 light-years from a star system recently conquered. As you wish, Commander. But, there is still a problem, we are short on Tier 7 Arcanists. Olivier did not waste time and pulled a screen with a list of civilian Tier 7 Arcanists. She looked through the screen while the information of all these people appeared in her mind. Then, she picked up someone and contacted him. Who the hell is disturbing my research, Your Majesty? Sorry for my rudeness, I was distracted, said a young man in his early 30s with brown hair. Oddly, he also had the same veins on his neck as Olivier, except his were not as prominent. It doesn't matter. John Carter, you've been officially recruited for a mission. Prepare to mobilize. Your Majesty, according to Wartime Mobilization Act, Section 134B, I would like to pay arcane points for compensation to be excused of my duty, replied John. I'm invoking Section 6D as this is a special circumstance. A look of displeasure appeared on John's face after hearing this. However, Olivier did not care. If you wish, you can head to the Mobilization Safety Department. Nevertheless, you have 5 minutes to head to the designated area and be deployed. Then, Olivier cut off the communication. John cursed out loud for a few seconds before thinking about his next step. He did not dare not obey a deployment order as he knew the consequences. He had seen the fate of some Tier 7 Arcanists who thought they were now too powerful for the Empire to control. He was just considering whether to go to the safety department. However, he did not think for too long before deciding, he did not want to die. So, he exited his demi-plane before operating to the nearest government warp portal. He showed his identification as a newly deployed soldier, allowing him to skip the line and also granting him access to teleport to the Mobilization Safety Department. After the teleportation, he saw a middle-aged woman with a severe look waiting for him. Are you John Carter? She asked. Yes, replied John with some timidity in his voice. He could sense numerous powerful weapons pointed at him now, and he knew if he did something out of line, he would be instantly obliterated. Then, she took a device that scanned John's body, mana signature, soul, fingerprints, and even DNA. You're indeed you, she said in a monotone voice. Sign this. A hologram appeared before he and John signed it. The latter did not say anything else as a magic circle appeared underneath the two, and they teleported to a room full of machines. Lie down on the machine. This will hurt a little. John knew time was of the essence, so he did not attempt small chats. He laid on the metal bunch and a bunch of runes appeared around him. Then, he felt intense pain. He wanted to curse the woman for saying it would only hurt a little. A few seconds later, diamond with something inside appeared floating above his head. Is that my soul? How beautiful, thought John. This piece of your soul will be stored in a special location. In case of your untimely death, it will be used for your revival, said the latter as some golems walked into the room to take the diamond away. I'm aware of this, replied John. The stern lady nodded her head before continuing, you should also understand this method is not absolute. If you die by the death gods, death authority, you have a 50% chance of permanent death. 50%? That seems a little high. You should be glad you have a chance at all, replied the lady. Only in the Empire where people could survive true death spell from a death god. Now, do you want other means of resurrection for assurance? What other method is there? We can copy your memories and transfer them to a clone. No, thank you, John quickly replied. He did not want to turn into a clone with a different soul. To him, such a revival is not revival at all but turning into a completely different person. As you wish. Do you have any questions? Do I have to pay for the resurrection? No. The Empire will pay for it. What about the resources to return to Tier 7? The Empire will pay 30% of it. That's fair. What about my soul? What's going to happen to it? After your deployment, you can choose to do with it as you please. John sighed in relief after hearing this. One of the reasons he hesitated to come here was that he feared the Empire possessed a piece of his soul. Even then, after getting it back, he will not immediately fuse with it but see some of his friends who are soul magic experts to check for any problems. Since you don't have anything else to ask, proceed to your next destination. John then used the Safet Department's warp portal to teleport to a military based in Saturn. And as soon as he arrived, he saw two men waiting for him. John looked at the muscular man with tattoos on his pale skin. A Viking? Based on his leak and slightly uncontrollable mana, he just reached Tier 6. He then focused on the other person. He had dark skin as beautiful as the night, but his eyes were reptilian. Dragon bloodline? My name is John Carter, Tier 7 Arcanist focusing on illusion magic. It's a pleasure to meet all of you, said John as he went for a handshake. Then, he remembered he was conversing with military men, so he did a military salute by placing his left arm behind his back and his right hand on his left shoulder. You can call me Gorm, Tier 6 Physical Arcanicist, subcategory Viking Warrior. The name is Abiadin Ngozi, Tier 6 Bloodline Arcanist and a Dragon Knight. John was slightly surprised after hearing Abiadin's introduction. To have a draconian bloodline and be a Dragon Knight was a great accomplishment. The Vikings and the Dragon Knights are the Empire's most elite forces. With you two, this mission should be easier. On the contrary, said Gorm. The fact we are being deployed means that the threat of the enemy is not something to underestimate. John's face became ugly for a moment before controlling himself. Indeed. Alright, let's deploy. He wanted to complete this mission as quickly as possible and return to his laboratory. Chapter 363, Arcanist's Dream. John followed the two to his deployment ship. Only one ship? Asked John. I thought there would be a fleet. Only one ship is needed, Gorm calmly said. John opened his mouth but did not know what to say. In the end, he decided to just shut up. He then focused on this magnificent metal vessel that was 2.6 kilometers long and 5 meters wide. Is this the latest HTS-136 ship? I've read about it, but it is even more beautiful after seeing it in person, FENL. Indeed, replied Abaddon. Although it is a new model, it has brought us a lot of victories. As the most powerful weapon of the Empire, I expect it to perform beyond my imagination, committed John. Most powerful, sneered Gorm. Can the ship compare to that thing? That's not fair. Nothing can compare to the floating city, Abaddon replied. When those two heard the word, floating city, they immediately had the same look, envy and desire. The day the floating city was publicized, all Arcanists watched that wonderful creation with awe. And then, something deep inside their soul awakened, telling them that this creation was perfectly suited for them. On that day, not a single Arcanist did wish or dream of one day having their own floating city, traveling the universe, dimensions, and countless planes in search of knowledge and pursuing the truth. Do you think we would ever have a chance at owning a floating city? John suddenly asked. Unless you have the artificer ability to build one, that's impossible, said Gorm. And he did not even mention the issue of resources. John sighed in desolation after hearing this. Only two people knew how to build a floating city, the Arcane Emperor, who created and designed it, and Nicholas Flamel, responsible for building it. John knew many artificers who tried to design one of their own, and the best they could achieve was making a city float. When it comes to the energy core, the weapon designs, the traveling system, the operating system, the shield system, and many others, no one knew how to develop these systems, let alone make them work together. Some of the best artificers of the Empire wrote academic papers. The conclusion was that if all the artificers and engineers of the Empire worked together and had access to the Empire's unlimited resources, they might create a floating city of their own. However, the final creation would only be a Tier 6 weapon, and most of its functions would only be a decoration with no useful purpose. And there was a 67% chance of failure. The paper brought a great shock to the world and much controversy. Many people argued and refuted the article no matter what evidence was presented. Many Arcanists tried everything possible to discredit this paper, even though the majority were not artificers and knew nothing about the subject. The reason for such a visceral reaction was that these people refused to accept the Arcane Emperor's capability was this advance when compared to all the Arcanists in the Empire. I disagree, said Abaddon. I think we will have a chance. What makes you say that? I think the Arcane Emperor will release the use of the floating city, but only after he has built a better one and found a way to restrict these power-hungry and law-breaking Arcanists. You do have a point, replied Gorm with some excitement. I think you give the Arcane Emperor too much credit, he is not that generous. On the contrary, I think he is bold and confident enough to do so, replied Abaddon. John shook his head. Your argument is flawed. The floating city is the pinnacle of artificers, a divine creation in its own right. You think it can become better? Why not? After all, it is technically only a Tier 9 weapon, replied Abaddon. I think it is only a matter of time before the Emperor elevates it to Tier 10. John wanted to argue, but his logical thinking and analysis told him the other was correct. With the Emperor's record, it is not out of the ordinary to accomplish such a feat, and John believed the time for this might not be long. The Emperor has disappeared for 10 years. Although there is a clone that has appeared to appease the people, the powerful Arcanists have some news and know the truth. And based on previous precedents, the Empire will undergo a period of rapid development and chances once the Emperor appears. Alright, the ship is ready, said Gorm as he looked at a projection from his hand. The three then entered the ship and led John to a specific room. You can register here, said Gorm, and John went through the proper procedure and signed the correct documents and magical contracts. Then, he sensed powerful energy rushing through his veins. Is this the power of Tier 8? I feel like I can do anything. I feel invincible. Everyone has the same reaction. It will pass, commented Abaddon. Your mission is to fight and contain a Tier 8 Lich. No problem, replied John with confidence. Things are not as simple as you think, added Abaddon. You're only Tier 7, so it will be a tremendous burden on your soul to control Tier 8 mana. The ship's artificial spirit will aid you, but your soul won't be able to bear it. Luckily, you have a talent for arcane sorcery, so you can control the mana directly to cast spells and do not need to channel it through your body. So, you should last longer than most Tier 7, but not long enough. Don't forget your Kairos poison will also affect your stamina, so you must either defeat the Lich as soon as possible or buy us enough time to recapture the star system and reinforce you, added Gorm. John sighed as he nodded. He knew the current situation arose because the Empire was young and had no Tier 8 Arcanists. At the same time, Tier 8 weapons were not as versatile and effective as an actual individual, even the ones controlled by artificial intelligence. The nature of power and magic in the universe made individual strength even more valuable in war. I'm glad you understand, said Gorm. Here is the plan. After a brief chat, the spaceships flew out of the atmosphere before activating the void jump engine. Whoosh! In an instant, the ship appeared outside the red number star system. They could not directly teleport there because of a black shield surrounding the entire star system. And not long after their arrival, a mage wearing black robes appeared. The mage only had skeletons with no flesh, his eye socket had 2 small purple flames, and he held a staff of bones and a skull for the head. Tier 8 Lich, 1st General Toon Eyes. John flew out of the spaceship, facing his opponent. He was not scared despite his usual cowardly attitude toward saving his life. And Toon Eyes did not underestimate his opponent because the latter was 1 tier below. He knew he faced an Arcanist, and this title alone solicited his respect. In the past 10 years, the Arcane Empire has proven that Arcanist is the most potent magic class because of its power, adaptability, and versatility. Toon Eyes did say anything and directly attacked. Death Beam. A black energy beam came from the skull's mouth in his staff with unprecedented speed and destructive capabilities. However, the beam passed through John's body as if he were transparent. Illusion, thought Toon Eyes as he rapidly turned around. Unfortunately, it was too late. Cracks similar to a mirror shattering appeared behind him. Before he could react, the surrounding trembled. Toon Eyes looked around, and everything looked the same, but he knew it was not. The mirror dimension. Damn it. At this stage of the war, it is common knowledge that one of the main tactics of the Arcane Empire is to fight in the mirror dimension. This tactic allowed them to preserve much of their territories with only minor damages. After all, when tier 6 to 8 individuals fight, the resulting destruction would destroy planets, stars, and star systems. The Undead Legion has no qualms created mass destruction to create more death. Meanwhile, the other civilizations have to control their power to prevent casualties. The restraint and control have granted the Undead Legion the advantage in all confrontations against any civilization or race in the Milky Way except for the Arcane Empire. Toon Eyes looked at his opponent with hatred, the purple flames fluttering. Chapter 364, Viking and Dragon Knights. Shoot the cannon, ordered Gorm. So, the crew quickly fulfilled his order. A massive energy light came from the ship, heading straight to the black shield. Cracks appeared on the shield, but it held on, confronting the energy beam for a few seconds before it broke. Finally, the ship could enter the red number star system. We have detected 2 planets already invaded, said one of the crew, and Gorm nodded before looking at Abaddon. Are you going to be alright? There should be no problem, but hurry up just in case. No problem, said Gorm before teleporting outside the ship while holding an axe. Then, he turned into a beam of light rushing straight into the planet. Abaddon had a look of slight envy. Because of the Undead Legion catastrophe, light magic, the natural enemy of the undead, has become the most precious form of magic. Regrettably, only a few people with soul mutation in the Empire can use light magic. The relevant department has been trying to make light magic usable by most arcanists through arcane rune spells, but the results have only been subpar. As Gorm landed on the planet, there was no catastrophic shockwave. Instead, an enormous pillar of light began to spread in all directions, purifying all the undead in its path. However, after traveling a few hundred meters, another gray pillar of light appeared and stopped Gorm's attack. So, he looked in the direction of the attack with a look of disgust. He knew the gray pillar was a tactic the undead used as a countermeasure for purification. They sacrificed countless individuals with pure souls to create the pillar, which can also be used to give light purification resistance buffs to any legion. Gorm saw another human with gray skin leading this battalion, holding a magical artifact that was the source of the spell that blocked his attack. Tier 6 zombie, thought Gorm with slight excitement. As he looked at his opponent, a large magic circle appeared behind him, and a battalion of people teleported behind him. This battalion was composed of muscular men and women with tattoos all over their bodies. They also had different melee weapons, mostly axes and hammers. The Viking battalion. Another battle? Maybe I can finally reach Valhalla, said a beautiful woman with defined muscles. First Commander, you know Valhalla is not real. If you believe it is real, then it's real, she replied. Plus, who says that we cannot create Valhalla one day in the future? Enough with your nonsense. Let's fight, ordered Gorm, and she grinned. She raised her hammer above her head, and a small magic circle appeared on the handle. Boom! She smashed on the grounds, creating thousands of earth spikes that impaled and purified the undead army full of skeletons and dark knights. At the same time, Gorm rushed straight to the zombie. Bang! Gorm smashed his axe, but his opponent responded by punching him instead. The shockwave of these two's clashes sends all the undead away. Ha ha ha, finally, a worthy challenger. I've had enough of these mages who disdain fighting head-on like real men, roared Gorm as lightning suddenly emanated from his body, exponentially increasing his speed. He smashed the head of the zombie, but the latter moved his head to the side, resulting in the axe hitting the axe, leaving a gushing wound. However, the zombie did not care about such a wound, he butt-headed Gorm instead, sinking in his skull. The Viking warrior did not care about such an injury as well as he naturally healed. He began to spin around with his axe, creating a small tornado that left thousands of cut wounds on the zombie. The zombie ignored his wound and made a crushing motion with his hand. Dark magic, crushing heart. Gorm spewed mouthfuls of blood as more leaked from his nose and ears. However, a small golden light appeared on his chest to regenerate the destroyed heart. Then, he began exchanging blow to blow with the zombie. Meanwhile, Abiadon began to act. He walked to his squad, where the majority of them wore knight armor and held long swords. Ready? Yes, Captain. Begin. All the squad members took out a headphone and put them on. Then, a voice straight from heaven entered their hearing, nourishing their souls and bodies. These muscular men, full of bloodlust, had an intoxicated look as they closed their eyes, enjoying themselves to the fullest. 30 seconds later, they finished. Miss Aishwarya's voice is angelic. I wish I could marry her, said one of the soldiers. Aishwarya Kapoor is literally the biggest star of the Milky Way galaxy, a tier 7 arcanist, and you think you can marry her, commented another. I can dream, can't I? Don't listen to him. We live in an era where nothing is impossible. Pursue her, and maybe you will have a chance. Stop wasting time. Let's deploy, said Abiadon, who also listened to the 30-second song. Although he, too, was fascinated by that voice, he had to control himself in front of his man. After listening to it, all the squad members felt their strength, spirit, and mana drastically increase. Aishwarya's songs had buff abilities for anyone who listened. So, the Empire recorded them in unique magical artifacts to use in the military. A latch opened from the spaceship, and Abiadon flew out. And as soon he entered the vacuum of space, an enormous dragon with 2 wings and 4 legs appeared underneath him. Abiadon sat on the dragon's neck like a car seat. And as soon as he did, it was as if he and the dragon were one entity. The same applied to his squad. They had dragons to rise since their arcane class was Dragon Knights. Technically speaking, these men should be Dragon Riders, and Dragon Knights should be Arcane Knights with dragon bloodlines. However, the two groups have been fighting for control over that name for many years, and the Dragon Riders currently have the advantage, so they kept the name. As the group of Dragon Knights floated in the void, Abiadon used a spell for his voice to echo in space. I know you're here. Come out. Then, a woman with dark clothes appeared. She had long and disheveled hair that floated in the air. She had no feet underneath her cloak, an extremely thin face, and razor-sharp teeth. Tier 7 Banshee, thought Abiadon. How do you know I was waiting for you? Isn't your usual tactic to send a second general with a first general? You guys seem never to evolve, said Abiadon with a sneer. Not necessarily, replied the Banshee as the space next to her cracked open, and a phantom-like figure appeared next to her. Damn it, a Tier 7 ghost. Abiadon knew his mission was to use number advantage to stall the Tier 7 second general until Gorm came to support him. Then, they had to wait for John to finish and reunite with them to finish or drive the enemy off. But now, there was another Tier 7 entity that the intelligence department did not detect. Abiadon quickly analyzed the situation to come up with countermeasures. He first sent a red code to Gorm and John to tell them the situation was out of hand. Then, he ordered his men through their mind communication. Begin mana and soul frequency synchronization. Despite the dire situation, these men were elite trained through the harshest method. So, they had no fears and quickly executed their orders. They controlled their mana and soul frequencies and wavelengths to perfectly match, allowing them to enter a stage of perfect fusion with their comrade. Adding to that, their already fusion with their dragons, this fusion was on another level. After the fusion, Abiadon felt he was perfectly synchronized with his man, having access to their mana and even soul power. They felt like a hive mind. Then, he used a spell perfect suited for this occasion. Expecto Patronus. The squad of 108 men and dragons turned into an enormous silver-white and transparent dragon before rushing toward the enemy. In recent years, it has been proven that the Expecto Patronus charm has excellent power against the undead and could purify many like ghosts, wraiths, and banshees. With this spell, Abiadon knew he could do maximum damage to his opponent, making them weary of attacking or coming close. At the same time, their translucent state granted them defensive abilities against many spells. The perfect spell to buy time, he thought. Chapter 365, Borders. John took out his long staff to confront his enemy. He tapped into the void, and thousands of clones appeared around him, and he controlled them to attack the Lich. All the clones raised their staff to cast a spell. At the same time, the Lich reacted. Dark magic, blood suction. Hundreds of the clones suddenly dispersed into motes of lights. Illusions, thoughts the Lich as he marveled. He could not tell the difference. And before he could further analyze the situation, one of the clone's spells hit him, activating his passive defensive measure to create a shield to protect him. So, some illusions can use spells, but some cannot? The situation was tricky as it would be a disadvantage to him if he had to constantly worry about which of his opponent's spells were mere illusions and which ones were real. So, the Lich decided to defeat his opponent as rapidly as possible. Based on the information received from headquarters, the weakness of these arcanists that use technology to fight tiers above them is their souls. It is challenging for them to control vast mana without their souls reaching the same tier. Dark magic, Hell Flame. A dark flame manifested from the Lich's staff, burning all of the illusion clones. The Lich planned to use a spell with a large area of effect to force the real body to defend itself, thus finding John's location. FEC. However, to his surprise, all the clones were destroyed, but the real John was nowhere to be seen. Then, the Lich felt a sudden danger behind him. A laser beam pierced his shield before passing through his body. Damn it, thought the Lich. He did not care about the destruction of his body. However, that spell had purification capabilities and could have killed him. Luckily, he used a soul protection spell to protect himself, but he was still injured. The Lich turned around, his soul flame obviously displaying unbridled rage. Then, he said something in an eerie voice. In the name of the great god, Guznad, ruler of death and heir of the Magus, I shall pass judgment upon my enemy. Death authority, death light. A dark beam of light came from above John containing the power of death. His face contorted as he knew that once this attack reached him, he would not survive. So, he clenched his teeth and said, I am an arcanist, and I shall pursue the truth even in my death. Then, he suddenly aged rapidly, turning from a young and handsome man in his 20s to an older man about to die. Then, a golden shield appeared to protect him, an act that made the Lich sneer. As a first general, he could borrow death god Guznad's authority to execute his enemy. Although he will use all his mana and enter a deep state of weakness for a while, it usually gets the job done. Soon, the Lich frowned as he saw the golden shield lasted a few seconds against his spell. However, considering his opponent had sacrificed their lifespan to boost their powers, he felt it was plausible to resist a little longer. And as expected, after a few minutes, the golden shield broke apart, and John was annihilated from the face of the world by the dark beam. The flames in the Lich's eye sockets became smaller, but his bones seemed to smile even brighter than before. He flew to the position of John's death for a final check before taking out a magic scroll from his interdimensional bag to exit the mirror dimension. Regrettably, before he could activate it, a bunch of chains appeared to tie him. They sealed his mana regeneration and his soul. Then, to the Lich's horror, John appeared before him, perfectly intact without a scratch. Do you want to know how I did it? Asked John with a smile as he took out a black jewel. I won't tell you. John placed the jewel on the Lich's forehead, and it disappeared, entering his soul dimension and isolating his soul. As a follower of a death god, the Lich's soul belonged to his god. So, John has to use a special magical artifact to prevent Guznad from summoning his followers' souls. With this tier 8 soul, my illusion world magic should take another step. John is one of the best illusionists in the Empire, even ranking in the top 10. And that's because his spell, the illusion world, allowed him to craft an entire world of illusion. From his first confrontation with the Lich, he was never present. He created his illusion world, similar to the concept of a domain. Inside that domain or space, he can create illusions within illusions. He can also influence people's emotions, which was one of the reasons that the Lich quickly became so enraged, deciding to destroy his opponent with one powerful attack that drained most of his mana. So, from the very beginning, he never came close to the Lich. And when the latter used that powerful spell, he had teleported countless distances away to ensure not to get hit. According to the law, the Lich was not his war trophy, and he could use it as he pleased. So, John placed the body away before exiting the mirror dimension. The first thing he did was remove an orb from his soul dimension as it put significant pressure on his soul, hence his mind or spirit. The orb was a magical artifact that allowed him to access the ship's mana core in the mirror dimension. He could not bring the ship with him since he would lose his power if the Lich destroyed it. He looked in the distance to see a silver-gray dragon and giant fighting 2 tier 7 undead. John did not waste time before taking action. He controlled the spaceship to launch one is its cannon. The 2 tier 7 undead tried to evade once they felt the danger, but John used a restriction spell to render them immobile. And after the cannon almost killed them, he captured the 2. Immediately afterward, he felt intense pain in his body. Then, the veins in his neck began to spread to his neck. John held his head, screaming. At the same time, some age spots appeared on his face and hands. Activate emergency healing protocol, said John's artificial spirit. Then, he disappeared before reappearing in a healing cabin inside the spaceship. Gorm and Abiadon checked on him and saw that his condition was slowly stabilizing. Then, they reported to HQ, who would send people to this star system. Although this region had no life, all the planets had precious resources, so a mining crew would soon arrive with the proper equipment. Finally, the crew returned home once the miners arrived. Meanwhile, back at HQ, Olivier received visual records of the victory in the Red Number star system. After checking for any anomalies, she focused on the different battlegrounds of this war. For a moment, things appeared stabilized before a red screen appeared before her, making her concentrate. Luna, what is it? Omicron, Shasta, Kala, Prenut, and Caffrey, all these star systems are being invaded, Luna said with her eyes completely white. No, I'm too late. Omegon has gone dark. Did you say Omegon? Show me the visual, Olivier hurriedly said. And soon, she saw a star system completely enveloped by darkness. She suddenly thought of something and called two people. Did Guznad show up in your area? How did you know? Responded Rowena. I have detected a tier 9 individual was coming my way, most likely a clone. The same for me, responded Dumbledore. All these people had the same weird veins as Olivier in their necks. You two must use the floating cities to deal with your opponent as swiftly as possible. Do it, no matter the consequence. What is the situation? Asked Rowena. Omegon is too close to our territory's border. If the Undead Legion can create a base there, it becomes easier to attack us. So, we must destroy Omegon at all costs. I'm sorry I could not detect it beforehand, Luna said. No, if it were not for you, we probably would not have detected anything until the base was created. If the Undead Legion created a base, removing them would become 1,000 times more difficult since each base is connected to Guznad's divine kingdom. From these bases, they essentially have an infinite amount of reinforcements, and Guznad can quickly descend on these bases without being noticed. So, Olivier would not let one appear so close to the Empire's borders. Chapter 366, Omegon. Dumbledore placed a mask on his face. Ariana, deactivate stealth mode, FNL. Yes, sir. On the border of the Empire's territories, thousands of light years away, an entire city suddenly appeared outside the star system. Dumbledore saw a man waiting for him. He had black robes, a long scythe, and red markings across his left eye. He had grey skin, and a small portion of his mouth was rotten to the point of showing the bones. Lord Guznad, do you want to fight here or in the mirror dimension? Dumbledore asked calmly. No problem, replied the Death God, who knew a Tier 9 battle could destroy the entire Milky Way galaxy if their strength were not probably controlled. Dumbledore secretly sighed in relief. It would be nigh impossible to force or trick the opponent into the mirror dimension even if it was just a clone. And Guznad refused to acquiesce. Dumbledore would have to report to the Empire, forcing them to activate the Grand Arcane Shield, which linked all the mana and ley lines of all the star systems in the Empire's territory to enact a shield that covered countless star systems. The problem with this shield was how much money and resources were needed to activate it. And given that Guznad was a Tier 9 god, the shield itself would not be enough, and an ether core of the same level as the floating city would be required to provide additional energy. Luckily, there was no need for trouble. A portal appeared between these two, and Dumbledore followed through with the floating city. And as soon as he entered the mirror dimension, he did not waste time. He accessed the mana from the ether core/philosopher's stone to boost his strength. Let's go, Fox. An enormous phoenix flew from the city, spreading its dozens of kilometers long wings. Guznad was not surprised by this true phoenix as this was not the first time he confronted his opponent. Ariana, remove all the limits of the floating city. Bombard our enemy with all the cannons except for the Void One. After giving the order, Dumbledore began his own attack. He felt the slight burden of the mana overflowing through his body. He had previously controlled the floating city when he was Tier 6. And now, it was easier to do at Tier 7, it placed less burden on his body and soul. Dumbledore used countless elemental spells to destroy Guznad. On top of that, the floating city bombarded him non-stop. However, the latter only evaded or defended, never going on the offensive. Undead Legion. Guznad waved his scythe, and millions of undead materialized before him. He then ordered them to rush toward the floating city's shield in suicide attacks. They did the same to Fox. Fox's flames and the floating city's shield instantly killed and purified the undead. However, there was no end to the number of them. No matter how many were killed, Guznad would make more. Dumbledore rushed as he knew his opponent was buying time. Ariana, send the golem legions. Then, an army made of all types of golems, soil golems, rock golems, and metal golems. They rushed towards the army of undead to destroy them. Although the golems lost regarding numbers, they won in strength. Additionally, Dumbledore was not finished. His attacks destroyed many planets, stars, and solar systems. So, he used transfiguration magic to transform the debris into more soldiers to block. With Guznad's legion occupied, Dumbledore acted more aggressively. He took out a potion to drink before using a spell he created himself. Arcane Rune Spell, the Phoenix's Last Song. Fox turned into a phoenix the size of a galaxy before rushing to Guznad to burn him into ashes. The latter erected a barrier made of black flames to protect itself. Back in HQ, Olivier watched the battle with a frown. She could tell Guznad's clone won't last long, but the issue was how long was too long. She checked the monitor that displayed the situation in Omegon's system. She had mobilized a space fleet armored with Tier 9 cannons to annihilate the entire solar system. However, despite the constant bombardment, the protective shield of Omegon remained intact. Guznad is way more powerful Tier 9 god that we gave him credit for. Tier 9 galaxy level had a wide gap. A person who could destroy one galaxy with one attack is Tier 9, but so is a person who could destroy 1 million galaxies with one attack. And the universe had trillions of galaxies. Should I use the void cannon? That was the only solution to deal with the death shield on Omegon. However, she and the others have long decided not to use the void cannon in this war. The main reason for that is news leaks. Because of the universe web, a lot of information that the Empire wanted to keep a secret has already leaked, meaning the Tier 10 gods in the central region has already noticed their existence. If it were not for Guznad blocking the entire Milky Way galaxy somehow, the situation would have been worse. Olivier decided not to be hasty. It has not reached the point where the void cannon is needed. She looked at the screen where Rowena faced another clone of Guznad. Her situation was similar to Dumbledore's, as the enemy simply wanted to buy time. She looked at her opponent and sneered. Raven, prepare to enter Dimension Alpha V. Yes, Master, replied the artificial spirit. Oliver, activate the Grand Arcane Shield, even for a moment. Alright, she replied despite not knowing Rowena's plans. As for the massive loss of money, it can be recuperated. Rowena controlled the floating city to open a spacetime channel out of the mirror dimension and fly out. Guznad followed despite the possibility this may be a trap. However, he did not have a choice since he did not want the floating city to reach the Omegon star system. And after learning that from his main body, the Empire activated their Grand Arcane Shield, he knew this was the correct choice. So, he used his death authority to mess with the spacetime channel and prevent teleportation. Gotcha, thought Rowena. She used the spacetime disturbance created by Guznad's intervening to teleport the two of them to Dimension Alpha V. When it comes to manipulating spacetime, Rowena was confident that only Edward was above her. And when it comes to certain aspects, even he could not compare to her. Guznad soon found himself in a dark gray place. He looked around, wondering what the opponent's plan was. But before seeing the surroundings properly, he began dissipating as if he had never existed. Where is this? He asked Rowena floating above the floating city, underneath the void shield. Of course, she did not respond. Dimension Alpha V was an empty and owner dimension the Empire discovered. And she used it for her experiment by modifying it and filling it with void energy. The floating city can survive here, but not Guznad. After Guznad completely dissipated, Rowena suddenly did not feel good as the veins on her neck began to spread. So, she teleported to the intensive care unit. Before falling asleep, she ordered, Raven, enter autopilot mode. Your mission is to go to Omegon and conduct an exterminatus order. Yes, Master. Raven controlled the floating city to teleport to Omegon and immediately began to bombard the shield. After a few attacks, cracks appeared on the shield, but it would slowly heal. It would take the city a few minutes to break it. Luckily, Dumbledore's floating city appeared to aid. It took a few minutes to break the shield with the other present. Then, Omegon star system was annihilated with one shot, not leaving a single piece of matter or energy from the entire star system. Afterward, the floating city purified the death energy remaining from the process of the undead building a base. Chapter 367, Guznad. The center of the Milky Way, the Ika star system, on a barren planet with only an all-black temple. A lich walked deep inside the temple until he reached a room clouded in darkness. At the center was a throne made of bones where a man sat with his eyes closed. The lich knelt with one knee. My reverend God, our plan failed. I know, replied Guznad as he opened his eyes. He sensed the death of his clones. And for one of them, he did not even know how the latter perished. My God, do you want to personally take action, just like during the Fall of Darkness? If I could, I would have already done so, replied Guznad casually. Has the situation gotten worse? Asked the lich. Yes. More Tier 10 gods have appeared and are now trying to enter this galaxy forcefully. The isolation plate will not be as effective if I don't use my power. The isolation plate is a precious magical artifact created by the Magus race. It's only due to its power that Guznad could isolate the entire Milky Way. However, once the Tier 10 gods began to attack its defense, he needed to personally attend to using to prevent them from succeeding. Even then, Guznad knew that it was not his power that could block so many almighty gods. This galaxy is the place of origin of the Magus race and kept some of their powers even after their disappearance. The isolation plate used the power left as a power source. Additionally, Guznad felt that some unknown force was also helping him, and he concluded it might have been Chronai. Otherwise, with his Tier 9 strength, he would not be able to last for so long. Is there anything else you need? The lich hesitated for a moment before continuing. My God, we have lost too many of our troops in this battle. It has reached the point of affecting our planar war. Wouldn't it be better to conquer the Sagittarius plane before invading this galaxy? By then, you would be a Tier 10 god, making things easier. There is no need. Continue our invasion, and pay attention to the Arcane Empire. They definitely have what I want. After saying this, Guznad motioned for the lich to leave. He was not stupid. Although it appeared he was making a foolish move, he knew it was not. From the Magus race inheritance he acquired, he learned of the ancient gods and how they were not restricted by faith. So, he was determined to walk the same path as the ancient gods. And if he becomes a Tier 10 god with faith, he would lose this opportunity. After so many years of searching, I can guess the Arcane Empire has the ancient gods' divine sparks, this is the only way to explain their rapid development. Furthermore, the natives of their home planet, Earth, have a very thin Magus bloodline. Guznad knew his path of power was guaranteed as long as he conquered and destroyed the Arcane Empire. With the divine sparks, his path toward Tier 10 will have no problem. And by studying the Magus bloodline and using the Arcane Empire's magical abilities, he has the opportunity to become the first Tier 11 god of the universe. I just need a little more time. As long as I have the opportunity to leave the isolating plate unattended, I will rapidly destroy all the resistance to my legion. Guznad closed his eyes as he prepared for the future. Vita star system, verdant planet. There was a beautiful elf with a golden crown made in the shape of leaves, clad in a long white and elegant dress. She looked at a towering tree, her eyes full of sadness. She raised her beautiful hands to caress the tree. She remembered how vibrant it once was, full of life and beauty. But now, it was lifeless, with no leaves, as if it was the beginning of autumn. The elf heard walking steps coming from behind, but she did not respond. Soon afterward, a man as handsome as her, also wearing a crown, stood next to her. "Have you heard the news?" asked Arion Kashgar, king of the elves. "What is it?" replied Myrtle Tirania, queen of the elves. "More than 5 new races have surrendered. They have conquered the red number star system, killed 2 of Guznad clones, and destroyed Omegon. As for us, we suffered even more casualties in the recent attack in the leaf tree star system." Myrtle did not respond as she continued to caress the trees. "You should make a decision as soon as possible," continued Arion. "Don't you have enough pride?" "Why should we bow our heads to humans?" asked Myrtle. "The Arcane Empire is multiracial and multi-ethnicity. You and I both know that is not true. A human created it, a human is their leader, and humans are the dominant species. In that case, why don't you consider that our race will become extinct if we don't surrender to them? Maybe, it's better for us to be extinct than to serve under others. I don't understand why you are so stubborn about this. The Arcane Empire is a very advanced civilization." "Advanced? Back in the days, our Sun Elves were advanced. We are no longer Sun Elves who wield high magic, are we?" replied Arion with a slightly raised tone. "Our bloodline is diluted to the point of non-existence, and our magic that the gods once feared has long been lost. We have nothing to be prideful about." Did I say something wrong? I only speak the truth." Arion sighed. "The Arcane Empire has recreated dragon bloodline, meaning, they should also be able to revert us to our ancestry. Furthermore, the arcane rune magic is also high magic capable of killing gods. As long as we integrate into them, we will prosper." Myrtle snorted at him before looking at the dead tree, making Arion sigh. "Enov. My love, I'm only worried about you. Most of the Elders' Council members are leaning toward surrendering. And if they decide to use force, you can no longer restrain them without the validator tree. So, please, make the wise decision." After saying that, he left to give her more time to think. Sirius Star System, Bravo Planet, the home of the Starskin race. A meeting took place amongst the governmental body of the Starskin race. Because their skin was as beautiful as the stars at night, the entire room appeared as if an astrologer was looking at countless galaxies from a distance away through a telescope. In the middle of the room lay a throne room where the Starskin Queen, a Tier 8 mage, sat with majesty. However, her usually black woolly hair had turned gray. While listening to the report on the recent news of the war, she suddenly coughed uncontrollably. Then, someone brought her a potion to appease her condition. "Your Majesty, I think it's best to surrender to the Arcane Empire. Otherwise, you won't survive long," said one of the ministers. "That's true. Although we know they are taking advantage of the situation to expand their borders, we cannot help it in the current situation." Many people agreed with the sentiment. Queen Keturah waved her hand, motioning everyone to calm down. "I know this is the best outcome. But now is not the best time to surrender to them." She knew their race had no choice but to integrate into the Arcane Empire. However, she also knew that the way of surrendering mattered. As a very talented race for divination, any factions would be glad to have them. Nevertheless, she also has to ensure the Empire values her race and does not treat them the same way as any of the others who surrendered. So, Keturah plans to display their values and wait for the Arcane Emperor to show himself before surrendering. "Maybe, the Empire can help us return home," she thought before coughing a little. Chapter 368, Edward's Return. Olivier sighed in relief after seeing Omegon's destruction. The situation would be more manageable from now on. She then waited for Dumbledore and Rowena to contact her. But beforehand, she received a call from Bellatrix. "What is it? Can you slow down the number of undead you are bringing? I'm beginning to be overwhelmed," complained Bellatrix. After the beginning of the war, the Undead Rehabilitation Department was established. It was a department responsible for awakening the memories of the undead and removing Guznad's control over them. Then, they would be rehabilitated to accept their new identity before being integrated into the Empire. Bellatrix was in charge of this department because she studied Herpo's ceremony magic and the Death Chamber. Edward even left his death staff for her to study. "I know there is a lot, but the undeads are population and even potential arcanists. So, store them in a pocket dimension and rehabilitate them later. In the meantime, you can recruit more people in your department to help with your load. Fine. I will organize a course to train skilled individuals at the fastest speed, Bellatrix. And not long after she said these words, 2 more screens occurred with Rowena and Dumbledore. Adding Luna's presence, most of the Illuminati's members are present. Olivier looked at the pale complexion of the two and their slightly aged face, and she asked, "How are you feeling?" "The situation is not looking good," replied Rowena. "The Kairos poison has spread even further, even to my soul. I can now barely use my tier 7 strength." "It's the same for me," added Dumbledore. "We need to do something about this," commented Luna. "The Kairos poison involved time, and not many people have deep research in this regard in the Empire. So, we might have to wait for Edward's return," said Olivier. "Wouldn't it be better to open wider access to the time room? It should fasten all time-related research," suggested Luna. However, Olivier shook her head. "The time room is related to the ancient gods, and with the entire universe paying attention to this galaxy, we cannot take the risk of even more exposure." The others agreed. The Arcane Empire seemed to have already caught unwanted attention from a few powerful tier 10 gods. If it is revealed they possess ancient gods' divine spark, the Empire's threat level to these gods will drastically increase. "I honestly feel like the situation is going out of control," said Bellatrix. "We should have called Edward back long ago." No one said anything, but Olivier could tell these people agreed. She knew this sentiment had existed for quite some time since the war began, but she had been adamant about not calling him. "You guys fail to see the bigger picture. This is only an intergalactic war going on for 10 years. And yet, many of you cannot handle it and want to ask for his help. If that's the case, what will you do when we face the real war? You all know what is waiting for us once we reach tier 11. I don't need to tell any of us the scale of the war Edward will participate in with Merlin and these unexplainable beings. So, what are you going to do then? Always ask him for help?" No one said anything as they knew she was correct. "You better start adjusting your mindset, do not rely on Edward unless necessary. Otherwise, prepare to stay home and be useless in the upcoming battle." "Olivier is correct, we need to adjust our mentality and be able to pull our weights," said Rowena. "Edward previously said that this universe is essentially a training ground for us. If we have to rely on his help to pass the training mode, we will only be a burden in the future." The others agreed. They realized they had to change their mindsets. Then, the group chatted for a while to make a few decisions. For example, Grindelwald and Nicholas Flamel will replace Rowena and Dumbledore as the controller of the floating cities in case of the need for deployment. Afterward, Olivier continued with her commander's duty. She received a notice that goblins pirates had just ransacked one of the Empire's outposts. She had to take of this situation since this was not the first time. A group of pirates led by a hobgoblin took advantage of the chaos to become rich. After thinking about it for a moment, she decided to send a small fleet composed of cyborgs and mechas. In the Empire, any individual with supernatural powers is considered an arcanist. As such, cyborgs and mechas also fall into that category. However, in the current war, any magic class not involved with magic has been delegated as not as important because these classes have no abilities to purify undead. And arcanists that rely purely on technology and aura have suffered the most during this war. Aura masters have it better since there is some research on how to use aura to purify undead. Although the results have been mediocre, there are still hopes. However, when it comes to mecha warriors or cyborgs that use energy cores that are not mana, they are essentially useless against the undead. After choosing who to send to deal with the hobgoblin pirates, she focused on another issue to deal with. While looking at the different situations of the war, she received an urgent call. And after accepting it, she saw a man kneeling on the floor, heads down, similar to an Eastern kowtow. "You're Lucius Malfoy, right?" Olivier asked. "Yes, Your Majesty," Lucius replied without getting up from his position. Olivier immediately noticed he referred to her by her royal title instead of her commander status, implying this might be a personal call. "Get up first, then tell what the problem is. Please, save my son." "Draco?" I remembered he was injured in a recent mission with the Royal Guard. However, he should have received the best treatment of the Empire. There was a complication during his treatment. The curse on his body somehow fused with his Kairos poison, mutating into something unknown. The diagnostic is that he only has a few hours to live. "Since it is a curse, did you use the Tears of the Moon?" The Tears of the Moon came from a divine tree Edward brought back from his previous voyage. It was capable of healing curses. "We did, and this is the only reason he is still alive." Lucius was desperate. The healers used the Empire's best resources but could not save his son. So, his only hope was the royal family had some unknown method not revealed to the public. He has been serving the Arcane Emperor for many years, even offering his soul. Although he is mediocre, his son and grandson have become captains in the Royal Guard and the Ghost Squad. And his wife is a Tower Master loyal to the royal family. So, he thinks the royal family might help him because of their family's long years of servitude. Olivier thought for a moment as she caressed her temple. "I remember Edward designed a time bubble. It can freeze an individual in time. You could try this method to stop him in time until a cure is found for the curse. Wait, this won't work with the Kairos poison. You can use the alternate method, death suspension. Death suspension? You can think of it as cryogenically freezing someone but using the power of death. I will have Bellatrix personally oversee your son's case to ensure success. Thank you, Your Majesty. There is no need to thank me. The royal family will not abandon the people who have remained loyal and served us for so many years. After appeasing Lucius, Olivier directly contacted Bellatrix to use the death staff to help Malfoy. She understood that these families with tremendous power and influence were one of the ways the royal family maintained their control of the empire. As such, she cannot abandon them when they need help. After dealing with the Malfoys, Olivier returned to her duty of overseeing the war. A few hours later, she suddenly sensed something deep in her soul. This feeling, she muttered with a wide smile. He's finally back. Chapter 369, Kairos Poisoning. While entering the Milky Way galaxy, Edward sensed some resistance before things finally settled down, and he headed straight home. However, as soon as he arrived, Morgana told him he was discovered despite being in hidden mode. Furthermore, he received notifications that numerous weapons were pointed at him. Luckily, Morgana quickly used his highest authority to calm down all the detection systems in the solar system. Something must have happened for everyone to be on such high alert, he muttered before heading straight to his castle. The moment Edward left the floating city, he could sense he had access to an enormous amount of mana. One of the titles the Akashic record granted him allowed him to take a small portion of mana from all the Empire's citizens. But now, he sensed he had enough mana to reach Tier 8 star system level. Our population has expanded to this scale? Not long after his arrival, Olivier walked into the throne room to see him. She calmly walked toward him with a smile before hugging him. However, Edward was not happy for long as he saw the veins in her neck. Kairos poisoning? Yes, she replied. Not long after you left, the war suddenly broke out. To cope with the situation, I allowed many Arcanists access to the time acceleration rooms to become Tier 7 quickly, but everyone suffered from Kairos poisoning as a result. Before he opened the time acceleration room for people to reach Tier 6 rapidly, he experimented on clones and discovered a form of poisoning called Kairos poisoning. The symptoms included certain parts of a person suddenly aging forward or backward. And in the worst-case scenario, the person could suddenly die of old age or revert to a fetus. He created a way to suppress the symptoms. However, this resulted in other symptoms such as drastic physical weakening, loss of vitality or life force, soul injuries, and decreased mana control. Edward frowned as he had not found a cure for Kairos poisoning yet. But, he was not the same person he was before leaving. He used Lucius' time magic to create a bubble around Olivier. Then, he extracted the anomalous time energy inside her body. The veins on her body shrunk in size but did not completely disappear. I will make a potion with time attribute to fix your problem. I knew this would not be a problem for you, said the pale-looking Rowena, who had just appeared, accompanied by Luna and Bellatrix. Edward kissed them before removing some of the poison from their bodies. When did you get back? 2 years after you left, Luna replied. Did something happen? No, we succeed in our mission. Really? Did you get the watch? Yes, we penetrated that isolated timeline and sneaked in. Then, we can create a clone of you and give it an unsuspicious identity in that timeline. Afterward, we orchestrated the event for your clone to get his hands on the watch. Excellent, said Edward. If this infiltration mission succeeds, he won't have to rely on the Akashic record to travel to other worlds. Then, he had them accompany him to the palace's lab. He wanted to brew a potion for them as soon as possible. In the Black Clover world, he learned about wide varieties of magic including poison. One member of the Black Bull, Gordon Agrippa, was an expert on poison magic. His entire family has been studying poison magic for countless generations. Adding to his new profound understanding of time magic, he learned from the devil, Astaroth. Edward knew he could create a potion to deal with the issue. Meanwhile, Olivier filled him in on what happened after his absence. Not long after you left, an event called the Fall of Darkness occurred. Guznad suddenly appeared and destroyed the headquarters of the Intergalactic Federation, killing all their powerhouses. Afterward, he attacked all the Tier 8 civilizations. The Elf Kingdom survived because of its divine tree but suffered tremendous damage. The Starskin survived because of a strange weapon their queen used. But they also suffered tremendously. The intelligence seemed to be destroyed in the attack. However, they recently showed up. We do not know how they survived the attack. Edward frowned after hearing this, but he did not interrupt her and continued brewing his potion. As for us, we survived because of the Death Staff and the ether core you left for the second floating city. Even then, 2.7 billion from the solar system died in that attack. Olivier remembered that attack with great detail. Her, Bellatrix, Dumbledore, Grindelwald, and the Flammel couple had to fight Guznad back even though they were on a bunch of Tier 6 Arcanists. Although they succeeded, the Empire lost billions of its people. Did you revive these people? Asked Edward. We tried but only succeeded in bringing a quarter of them back. Guznad's death authority granted them true deaths, with their souls completely destroyed. Ultimately, we could only honor their memories with a national funeral. Edward nodded as he knew some things were impossible to change. After that, we entered war mobilization mode, continued Olivier. The first thing I did was to gather the resources needed to build the second floating city. The process was smoother than expected since the entire galaxy was now in chaos. I knew it would take time to build it, so I took some drastic measures. I had the artificer department use the time acceleration room. However, to combat the Kairos poisoning, I used clones. The artificer building the city placed their consciousness inside specifically create clones who would then build the floating city inside the time acceleration room. That would not work, commented Edward. You're correct. They built the city relatively quickly, but all the artificers were poisoned, and many good ones even died. Olivier sighed as she felt sorrow for the death of these talented individuals. However, in times of war, death was inevitable, and she knew this fact too well. Death has not been completely conquered, even in an advanced civilization like the Empire. You did your best, and that's all that matters, said Edward with doting eyes. Olivier smiled at him before continuing. With the floating city, and Rowena and Luna's return, the war situation was under control. Guznad also appeared to be busy regarding something and only appeared in the form of clones that were way weaker than his main body. I proceeded with our plan to use the chaos to annex and expand our territories. We currently have 167 star systems with life and 397 star systems with no life but with resources. While all the other civilizations' territories are rapidly shrinking, we are growing exponentially. As long as the other Tier 8 civilizations surrender, we will only have to deal with Guznad before we can conquer the entire galaxy. I see, said Edward as he raised a potion battle before his eyes and swirled it. He shook his head before starting over with new ingredients. Do you have any information on the fallen Intergalactic Federation? No, their last leader died 2 years ago, they are no longer part of the equation. What about Guznad? Any information? We know he is somehow related to the Magus race, said Luna. And there is a high chance he is after the divine sparks and us. Can't you divine any information about him? No, he seems to have a very powerful magical artifact related to divination. Many times, he has even bested me. The Magus race, muttered Edward as he focused on the potion. Everything about them seemed extremely precious, commented Rowena. If they are truly the only Tier 11 civilization this plane has seen, it makes sense, added Bellatrix. After that, the group did not continue talking as they waited for Edward to finish. A few hours later, he had a blue potion in his hand, and he nodded with satisfaction. He first tested the potion on a clone before he allowed them to use it. And as expected, most of the chaotic time energy in their body was expelled, their souls were now healed, and they had no problem controlling their mana. Of course, the potion was not an instant fix, as there were still some problems. But, a month of more recuperation should bring them back to full health. So, tell me, how was your voyage? Asked Rowena. Chapter 370, Universe Web. Edward then told them everything that happened to him on his voyage. From the moment he arrived, to be sealed, his time as the Wizard King, and finally, his confrontation with Eve. Then, he also mentioned his experience in the Konosuba universe. During the explanation, Fleur and Hermione came to reunite with the family, telling their experience. Edward then introduced Wiz to the family. The others did not say anything about someone new coming into the family. Instead, they tried to make her feel comfortable and at home. Sounds quite like the adventure, commented Luna. Next time, I won't miss the opportunity. We now have 3 floating cities and should be able to build a few more. So, everyone can go whenever they please, said Edward. You cannot just change everything as you did after the last voyage, said Olivier. Is something wrong? Do you remember the death cult? Asked Luna. Herpo's pawns, he said with a frown. I thought I dealt with them already. You did, but a new one under Guznad's control has infiltrated our borders, said Luna. They first started to lure the citizens with the promise of immortality. However, their tactics failed with the elixir of immortality more available because of the war. So, they switched to luring people with power. Many people have become traitors because Guznad promises them to become divine mercenaries. As long as these people do things for Guznad, such as giving it information, they would receive divine blessings that increase the power of their soul, increase their mana, and even acquire knowledge. The divine energy of gods is versatile, allowing them to achieve all these things. EENL. Is the situation worse? Asked Edward with a frown. The Ghost Squad, Diviner, and Intelligence Department have rendered the situation manageable. However, it is impossible to hide such a large change from Guznad's grasp. So, a cleanup is in order? If possible, yes, said Luna. But that's not the main problem, added Olivier. Ever since the war began, the Universe Web has become an important tool to send information. As you can guess, our information has been leaked to the outside world, said Edward before caressing his temple. Yes. So, if you don't want more of our secrets to be known to the Tier 10 gods of the Central Region, you have to deal with the issue. Edward did not say anything else. He's been trying to decipher the Universe Web for decades with no success. He did not even have a starting point he could use, meaning he was utterly clueless. Everyone quieted down and waited for him to think. "Let's cheat," said Edward. "Excuse me," asked Rowena. "We don't know anything about the universe web, and it would take too long to research it, so let's cheat to get the answer." "You mean the Akashic record?" Edward nodded and no longer hesitated. He used his connection to the record and asked the price for information on the universe web. "Fuck," he screamed, losing control. "Watch your tongue," grunted Rowena. However, Edward ignored her and showed her the price for the information. The word fuck almost escaped her mouth. She only controlled herself out of pure unwillingness to make the same mistake he had just corrected him on. Edward then showed everyone the price even whiz. However, she was confused about the meaning behind the information. Although Edward had her undergo learning training to be up to date on the ongoings of the Empire, certain information was not present in her learning module. So, he condensed some of his memories and gave them to her so she could understand the situation. And she also wanted to swear after learning the exorbitant price for such a piece of information. "Can we afford it?" asked Olivier. "Morgana, calculate the price." "As you wish, boss." A few minutes later, she said, "It would cost us 80% of all the Empire's knowledge." Edward wanted to throw something at someone. "Even with the knowledge we just brought back?" "Yes," she replied, since her calculation also considered those. Edward sighed and pondered for a moment. A few seconds later, he said, "Let's do it." "Are you sure?" "This seems too expensive," said Rowena. And the others agreed with her. "It's because it's so expensive I want to know the information. I hope the price is worth it." Edward could see the pain in their face despite agreeing with him. After all, in this world where knowledge equals power, it was a pain to hand over such a vast quantity of knowledge. "Don't be so sad. There is a high chance we can recuperate our loss with the information gained. Isn't that the reason we started the Empire? To use knowledge to create more knowledge." "You're right, we should not lose ourselves and become like these other civilizations that hoard knowledge," said Luna. After everyone agreed, Edward no longer hesitated and exchanged with the Akashic record. Then, Edward closed his eyes and reviewed a summary of his exchanged knowledge. An hour later, he opened his eyes, full of brightness. "Mana grid, the source of all mana," he muttered with excitement. "An invisible grid travels throughout the entire universe like veins, the mana grid. It is the source of all mana in the universe, and all the ley lines on all planets are connected to that energy grid. The Magus race was a race of pure mana, granting them a connection to that grid to draw unlimited energy. They also used the grid as a way to connect and communicate throughout the entire universe. That was the universe web. After the Magus race disappeared, the gods discovered and took over the universe web, connecting everyone." "Fascinating. Having access to this grid is like having access to nearly unlimited energy," muttered Edward, thinking about all the possibilities of that information. "What is it? What did you find?" Rowena hurriedly asked, and Edward sent the information to all of them. "Is this the source of magic?" asked Hermione. "At least, in our universe, it is." "I don't think we can say for certain that's the source of magic," said Wiz, making everybody look at her. However, she was not shy. After all, mana is only a certain aspect of magic. "What about the other important thing, the soul? We now know where mana comes from, but what about the soul? Is it just an organ that all lives are born with? Or is there another mystery?" "Wiz has a point," said Edward. "I've theorized that in some universes, most likely the ones where magic does not exist, the soul and its dimension do not exist. Instead, the soul is nothing but a form of consciousness when the brain evolves to a certain stage." "You're probably correct," said Olivier. "In the Star Trek universe, the concept of the soul has been studied, and a similar conclusion has been made. Even the clone you made for me had no soul after being influenced by the laws of that universe. I'd love to see that study." "Get back on track," said Hermione. "What can we do with the mana grid? Could we block access to the universe web in our galaxy?" "Near infinite energy also means near infinite resources," said Edward. "As for the universe web, if you give me some time, I could create a blocker with the floating city and brain room. I could also use this opportunity to have Morgana begin invading the universe web to acquire information for us." "It seems that the price we paid was worth it," commented Olivier. "However, before you enter deep research mode, there are many things that you need to deal with." "That's true. Let's have dinner with my parents, and I'll introduce Wiz to them. After that, I'll begin to deal with these things." "What about your return? Do you want to announce it now?" "We'll see." Afterward, Edward met his parents and had dinner with them, introducing them to his new wife. His mother was happy, his dad secretly jealous, his aunt shaking her head in disapproval, and his cousin, Susan, called out his womanizing ways. Chapter 371, Another Linchpin. After the dinner, Edward, his wives, and his aunt had a meeting since he wanted to show them something. He led them to a storage room inside his floating city. "Who wants to go first?" he asked, holding a book. "Is this what you called grimoire?" "Yes. It is connected to this magical artifact," replied Edward, pointing at a bookshelf. "This artifact has the power of the universe while acting as an artificial spirit similar to Morgana. The artifact is connected to the grimoire, which is connected to your mind and soul. And using it, it can calculate and create spells perfectly suited for my need, asked Rowena. FWOE. Oh, yes. And you won't need to learn much knowledge to wield this spell. You will still need to practice to master it completely. That would make a great magic system perfectly suited for battle mages, commented Luna. That's true. This thing can also help us wield certain previously difficult magic, for example, time magic, added Edward. Arcanists can also use it as extra spell slots to relieve the pressure from their mind space. Not all arcanists can instantly create magic circles inside their mind space to instantly cast spells. Some have to leave the spells inside, placing pressure on their soul dimension/mind space. However, with the grimoire, they can use it as an unlimited magic scroll, granting them more spell spots. The grimoire is helpful to elite arcanists that do not need spell slots in their mind space. They can use it to hold certain powerful spells that require long chants or preparations. I want to go first, said Rowena. Edward nodded before having her place her hands on the brown-color grimoire. Runes appeared on the surface before entering her eyebrows. Then, the grimoire's cover changed to gray, with a sigil that looked like the Ravenclaw crest at Hogwarts. Rowena quickly opened the book to check the spell inside. She raised her hand to create a sphere with Roman numerals floating on a ring that surrounded the sphere. I should have guessed you would get Lucius time magic, commented Edward. After a little study, you won't need the grimoire to use time spells. Rowena smiled before changing the page. Interesting, she muttered before creating a small gray orb in her other hand. Suddenly, everyone felt a sense of danger and took a step back, even Edward. Is that void energy? He asked in shock. Although it was extremely low in quality, he recognized it. Yes. The spell allowed me to store and release void energy from my soul. Edward then remembered Rowena's experiment ever since he first met her. She would absorb a small portion of void energy in her soul, making her sick and dying in the process. Then, she would allow her soul to adapt to it before increasing the amount. Her objective was to mutate the composition of her soul, granting it the ability to control void energy. Her experiment was dangerous. And Edward tried to talk her out of it, but she was stubborn. Ultimately, he had to ask Merlin for some unique potions for the soul to ensure nothing went wrong. This spell will really help my research, commented Rowena. Meanwhile, Edward looked at the bookshelf's magical artifact. It seems there is a benefit in using a universe will as the core for an artificial spirit. If he had the opportunity, he would find a way to update Morgana using a universe will. After giving himself a mental note, Edward had the others also acquire their grimoire. Hermione's attribute was space and summoning, Fleur was mind control, Luna acquired Vanessa's fate rewriting magic, Olivier had extreme ice, Bellatrix had some death-related attribute and had both light and dark magic. As for Amelia, she had all four elements of fire, wind, earth, and water. In the end, each person's main attribute did not matter much since Edward controlled the artifact and could give their grimoires whatever spell they wanted. The main reason he had them use it was to test the artifact and see if there were any problems in using it in this universe. So, once everything finished, he had to get down to business. However, before everyone changed location, Luna suddenly stopped as his eyes turned all white again, gathering the attention of everyone present, waiting for her. I found another linchpin, she said a few minutes later. His name is Chris Tiu. Immediately, the person's information appeared before the group, showing a middle-aged man of Philippine descent. Do you have any idea of the reason he's a linchpin? Asked Edward as he reviewed the other's life and record. The only words to describe this man was dedicated and hardworking. It seems to be related to the grimoire you brought. I see. In that case, we'll deal with him like we did the others, he replied. By the way, what happened to Havika Kainalu, the other linchpin? He succeeded in his project, and you will not believe what he found. Oh, is it that important? Yes, and of the highest level to the Empire's development, commented Olivier. In that case, I can't wait to meet him. Edward had a lot to do, but Havika was not currently the priority. Once he dealt with everything else, he'll meet the young man whose innovation was so crucial to the Empire. For the next few hours, Edward spent time catching up on what had happened in the past 10 years since he left for the Black Clover world. He learned about political, economic, cultural, and military changes. As you can see, we have done a great job so far integrating so many cultures, races, and ethnicity into the Empire. Nevertheless, there is still some problem with racism and prejudice that needs to be taken care of. Edward nodded as he looked at the date. All schools in the Empire, scattered in different star systems, have to learn about other cultures, languages, history, and customs. And all citizens also have a mandatory online class to learn the same thing, and failure to do so will result in trouble with the law. Although it has become a nightmare for citizens to learn so many things, in a society with memory magic, it is not as much of an issue as one would think. Some races do not want to interact with outside forces, commented Amelia. I've decided to let them live an isolated life in their home planets, under the Empire's protection, as long as they provide certain resources. Some races do not want outside influences to intervene in their way of life. And so, based on the individual case, Amelia decided which to accept their request and which to ignore. Anything specifically I need to deal with? Yes. With the expansion of our borders, there has been an increase in representatives in the council. And most of these new representatives are determined to ask for nobility titles. I've shut them down before, but they were insistent. So, I've sent the ghost squad to visit them. At first, they backed down. But a few years later, they returned even more aggressive than before. According to a recent investigation, there might be a team of Tier 7 arcanists supporting them secretly. And this group might have a tie to the new death cult. Nobility title, huh, he muttered as he looked at the bill proposition. These new representatives were once nobles that treated ordinary people worse than dogs. They held all the wealth and magical knowledge, preventing people at the bottom from rising. Once the catastrophe began, they quickly surrendered to the empire, but they were not happy that they no longer had any privileges. A few even wanted to make magic less accessible to the public, returning things to how things were on their controlled planets. Now that they've used the empire's resources to become more powerful and acquire wealth and immortality, they want to change things to the old ways. I'm going to update the floating city. Once I'm done, Luna can use its power to divine all the people connected to these people. Then, we will deal with them in one fell swoop. After that, Edward discussed many problems the empire was facing. There was a rise in the crime rate because of the sudden increase in population and the lack of manpower due to the war. Many people protested the constant expansion of the borders. These people did not like the empire's colonialist nature. Planet Earth's mana level had reached a record high, and the process of mana revival ended. Many people born with magical talents appeared in the empire. At the same time, many animals evolved into magical beasts. The Atlanteans had to surrender after the war started. Olivier did not want them to become a destabilizing factor, so she ordered their conquest. The Martians suffered a catastrophe that almost wiped out their species. There were many things to deal with, and he suffered through the process. And once he finished, Olivier told him, "There is someone you need to see and decide how to deal with." Immediately, Edward sensed something was wrong as everyone present had a serious look on their faces. Chapter 372, Fellow Traveler. 2 years before Edward's arrival, Britain Region, Night Valor Magic University. A young arcanist appeared to be sleeping on a pile of books inside a library. He had an ordinary black magic robe, and from the mana emanated from his body, the young lad was only a Tier 1 arcanist. In the current era, libraries should have become obsolete since all citizens can access knowledge or books directly from the web. However, libraries have a special meaning to people in a society that worships knowledge. As such, there are even more of them across the Empire's territories, and many people spent their relaxing time in the library. This young arcanist was one of the students who enjoyed studying in the library instead of using Skynet and virtual reality. The young lad suddenly woke up from the pile of books, dropping many on the floor. Luckily, he was in an isolated booth. He had a look of confusion as he looked at his surroundings. "Arg," he grunted as he held his head in terrible pain for a few minutes. Then, the confusion in his eyes was gone, replaced by shock and excitement. "I'm not dead," he muttered. "Better yet, I've been reincarnated in a world of sword and magic?" The young lad rapidly calmed down as he analyzed the memories inside his mind. "My name is Charles Wentworth from a distant planet. My parents died in a recent catastrophe, and I'm a weak arcanist studying in a third-rate magic university." Charles took a moment to review the memory of the body he habited. He was once a commoner on a distant planet, trying every day to survive. Then, an undead legion invaded his planet, killing his family and friends. Luckily, the Arcane Empire arrived in time to conquer the planet and deal with the disaster. Charles thought life would return to how it was, but his fate changed when he was detected to have above-average magical talents. Then, he went through an intense course study where he had to learn 7 years of knowledge in just a year. After he finished, he took a test to determine what magic university he could attend. Unfortunately, after a year of intense study, he could not participate in the best school in the Empire, Bones Advanced Magic School. However, Charles was not discouraged since most of his peers could only attend schools on offshore planets of the Empire. And only he and a few could attend schools on the central planet, Earth. After coming to the Night Valor Magic University, Charles understood how competitive schools were in the central planet, even a third-grade one. So, he spent most of his time in the library studying until Charles Smith took over his body. "It's a shame that my current self only has above-average magical talent. However, as long as I work hard enough, I should be able to become a powerful arcanist." Charles remembered his previous course. He once saw a recording of Tier 7 using one spell to destroy an entire star that was millions of times the size of Earth. And he knew this was far from the limit of the magic. Compared to the boring Earth I was from, with no magic, this one is more interesting. I should take this chance to become one of the most powerful arcanists in existence. Back on his Earth, Charles had read many isekai novels, anime, and fanfiction from countries like Japan, Korea, China, and even English. So, he believed he could use his knowledge to make a difference in this world. Excitedly, he reviewed his memories to determine how he would proceed in this world. Charles quickly noticed that he had a photographic memory as he checked all the information this body had. The process took more than half an hour before Charles opened his eyes, his body trembling all over. It took him a while before he could calm down. In his review, he quickly figured out this was a very advanced world where magic had developed to the extreme. As such, his idea from back on Earth might be useless. However, this was not what scared him. He was trembling because he learned this was the Harry Potter universe. Charles wanted to check whether he thought wrong. So, he used the watch on his wrist to access the web and search for Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. And as expected, he saw it was one of the best schools for young arcanists before university or advanced school. Charles searched the name Harry Potter and learned the latter was the Auror Governor-General, responsible for all the Aurors of planet Earth. He then searched Hermione and learned she was one of the Empress of the Empire. As for Ron Weasley, his result was that he was a newly promoted general in the Space Marine. What is going on? What is going on? Thought Charles repeatedly as he wanted to know the cause of all the changes. From what he knew, the Harry Potter universe was a weak one. There should not be people powerful enough capable of destroying stars. At first, Charles thought he had traveled to some parallel timelines where the power level of the Harry Potter universe was simply monstrous. But after a brief search, he knew the reason for the anomaly. Edward Bones, the Arcane Emperor. Charles remembered reading the book. Edward Bones was only mentioned in a few sentences, and the only thing known about him was he died young during the First Wizard War. His parents were members of the Order of Phoenix and died during that war. But now, he was alive and changed the world beyond recognition. Charles stared at a holographic picture of Edward as he read about the latter's experience. It was simply a legendary tale. He often felt he was reading a high fantasy novel of a Gary Stu character as he read through the main accomplishments. Extreme talent, extreme intelligence and ingenuity, legendary accomplishments, and a large harem including original book characters. This Edward is totally someone who has reincarnated like me, thought Charles, his face full of jealousy. Somehow, he felt this arcane emperor was living the life he should have had. If he had the chance, he would create a harem with Hermione and Fleur. Charles shook his head to focus as he needed to know what to do. No matter what, he had to hide his identity because he did not know his fate. The emperor might be happy to meet someone from the same place as him. Or, the latter might find him a threat or nuisance and eradicate him. He was only a weak Tier 1 arcanist, while the emperor was Tier 7 at the very least if not more. There appeared to be a significant disparity between their natural talent. Charles had a late start, and he did not have nearly as many resources as the emperor. And since he did not want someone else to dictate his life, should I flee the empire? Charles shook his head to quickly eliminate this option. The entire galaxy was in the midst of an undead invasion. With his meager strength, he could never survive alone in this cruel universe. He probably could not even afford to buy a personal spaceship for a long time. My only option is to lay low and try everything possible to become powerful while not garnering any suspicions. Luckily, Charles Wentworth has a clean background. After making a decision, Charles looked at the pile of books before. Knowledge was the only for him to survive and prosper in this strange world. I'm a transmigrator, so where is my golden finger or cheat-like ability? Charles muttered. Then, he seemed to sense something and closed his eyes. A few seconds later, he opened them with great joy. He knew his future in this world was guaranteed. Chapter 373, 24-Hour Callback. Charles was excited as he knew he had a cheat-like ability called 24-Hour Callback that allowed him to acquire vivid information from 24 hours from the future. So, he quickly took one of the books he had just finished reading labeled, The Difference Between Fire Elements and Oxygen-Generated Fire. After hours of studying, he barely comprehended 20% of the book because it involved the connection between magic and science. With the new Charles taking over this body, his comprehension could be quantified at 40% since the new Charles had more knowledge regarding science, while the old one came from a distant planet where he had never heard of science before. Charles then activated his ability with great excitement. In an instant, 24 hours of knowledge appeared in his mind. It was like he spent every single hour of the next 24 hours reading and studying the book. He had no trouble processing the knowledge after resting for a few seconds. My understanding of this book can be quantified to 70% now, he thought excitedly before using his power again. Then, after 48 hours of ongoing study, Charles mastered the book's content in just a few minutes. I have a future in this terrible world, he thought, feeling as if his future was not as dark as he imagined. With elation, he took another book and used his power. And it worked, but soon afterward, Charles felt dizzy and almost passed out. He then received information inside his mind that he had overused his spiritual/soul strength and would only be able to use his ability after recuperating. Then, Charles suddenly had an idea if he could use his mana as a price instead of his ability. And to his surprise, it worked. With his Tier 1 mana, he could use his ability another 5 times to master a few more books. Then, he became weak and difficult even to stand immediately. He closed his eyes to enter a deep state of meditation to recuperate his mana and spiritual strength. 3 hours later, he returned to his peak state. I feel my soul strength increased. Is this because I depleted and replenished it, or the result of mastering new knowledge? Charles felt it was a combination of both, meaning his ability also granted him some other benefits. With excitement, Charles then continued his study. He spent the next 2 weeks in the library, using his cheat-like ability to master 80% of the first-year course. He became semi-renowned as the kid who never left the library. Luckily for him, the school-granted robe had cleaning enchantments, so he did not have to worry about hygiene. He only stopped after feeling an intense hunger after not eating for a week. His mana and aura could no longer sustain him without food. So, he left, heading for the cafeteria. While heading there, Charles was excited while deep in thought. I should meet the soul requirement to reach tier 2. I only have to spend some time absorbing mana. If only I had money to buy potions, I could probably reach the required mana in 2 days. Charles did not mind his lack of resources. The university has mana-dense room for students to use to gather mana at a faster rate. Additionally, the top 100 students received many funds and resources that can help them in their magical journey. If it were before, Charles would never dare think about these funds. But with his ability, it was only a matter of time before he reached the top of the university and even qualified to transfer to the Bones Advanced School of Magic. Furthermore, he could send in ideas to acquire arcane merit. As a person from Earth, he has many things to draw inspiration from. Even if the Arcane Emperor is from the same place as him, Charles does not believe he has thought of all the ideas. So, with skippy steps, he went to the cafeteria and used his ID to log in before having a hearty meal. Although the previous Charles had food back in his dorm, he preferred the food cooked by a person instead of a robot. And the new Charles followed the old habit. After his meal, Charles decided to have some sleep before going back to study. Most of his classes were online, and he could attend them when needed. Charles followed his memory to head to his dorm. All the students had single dorms with at least 2 rooms. With extension curse, space was not an issue. In front of his door, he placed his hand on a pad, and he heard a mechanical voice. Scanning, fingerprints identified, mana and aura unidentified, soul fluctuation unidentified. According to the university rules, this anomaly will be reported to campus police. Please wait for their arrival. Charles instantly became scared as he feared that he might have been discovered. His first instinct was to run away, but he calmed down as he knew this was the stupidest decision. The anomaly could be an error in the system. And running away would only make things worse. Plus, he did not think he could run far. And he was right, not even 2 minutes passed, and 2 men with campus police uniforms came before Charles. He could see they were weary as one had a gun and the other staff. The one with the staff was a middle-aged man with slightly gray hair in his temple. My name is Officer Kevin Pretzels. What seems to be the issue? There seems to be a problem with the lock in my room, replied Charles, trying to be as composed as possible. Errors are possible when it comes to products like this. So, come with me to the office and have a proper scan. If your identity has no issue, you will receive an apology from the university and compensation. Charles opened his mouth to ask what would happen if his identity did not match, but he did not dare. He also knew it was impossible to run as he could sense both these officers were Tier 4 arcanists. Ultimately, he had no choice but to follow them along. Kevin brought him to a room full of machines and conducted some tests, which he did not have access to the result. Kevin stood next to a young man dressed in a suit in a room full of floating holographic screens. So, what's the result? His mana, aura, and soul's fluctuations and frequencies displayed anomalies above the standard deviation, especially compared to his previously registered data. But this could mean a sudden mutation, or someone took over his body. Yes, Director. Our equipment is not sophisticated enough to determine. That's fine. Call the intelligence department and report him. Isn't that a little too rushed? He could be an innocent student? Or, he could be a spy sent to infiltrate the Empire. We are in a time of war, so we cannot take these things lightly. As soon as he finished these words, the young man looked at the door as a slightly plump woman walked in the room with a man holding binders behind her. Dean Palin, what do I owe this visit? Asked the young director. I've heard you caught a student with some issue with his identity. That's correct. There is no need to make a big deal out of this. It's probably a mistake of the machines. So, just register his new data so he can attend school properly. No, he is an anomaly and must be reported. You must not understand. No, I understand, said the young director calmly. You do not want the university to have a spy infiltration scandal. But your actions can endanger the Empire and its citizen. After saying that, the director contacted the intelligence department, while Palin left fuming in anger. Not even a minute after the report, 2 agents appeared, 1 woman and 1 man. The man was Middle Eastern and had a mean face with scars, while the woman was a beautiful woman with brown skin. Where is the suspect? Asked Agent Amir directly. After they led him to Charles, Amir immediately placed mana-sealing cuffs on his hand, treating him like a prisoner. This is just protocol, said Agent Naya. As long as we clear your name, you will get your freedom and be compensated. Charles was intelligent enough to understand these 2 people had a good cop and bad cop dynamic. Nevertheless, he still felt reassured by her words. Meanwhile, Agent Amir placed some glasses on Charles's face, completely removing his senses. When he regained his sight, he found himself in a chair. Sitting opposite his table was Agent Amir. I have a few questions for you. Answer them honestly. If someone has a better name for the ability, I'm up to suggestions since I don't like the one I used. Chapter 374, Unescapable Net. Calm down, calm down, calm down, and think logically, Charles repeated in his mind. He looked around at his surroundings, and everything appeared like a routine police interrogation. The only anomaly was that the female agent was no longer present. In the short time I lost consciousness, many things could happen. For example, they could have searched my soul or given me Veritaserum. If not, there might be magical items that could detect lies. So, I need to use my words carefully. You have infringed on my rights, said Charles, going on the offensive. Oh, how is that? Asked Agent Amir. You gave me Veritaserum. According to the Empire's laws, this is illegal. All the Empire's citizens must take political science classes to understand the Empire's laws and regulations. And any individuals who want to vote for any positions including the council elders have to pass a test to show they have a certain understanding of politics and government bodies. And the previous Charles also had to take the course. Because of the Wartime Mobilization Act, these rights can be removed to any individuals suspected of being spies as long as sufficient evidence is proven. And what evidence do you have? Just because my soul has some mutation? Some mutation, asked Agent Amir with a sneer. Tell me, how is above mediocre tier 1 arcanist can resist the power of Veritaserum that could work on a tier 6 arcanist? Charles's heart skipped a beat, but he did his best to resist changes in his facial expression. As I said, a mutation. I'm probably one of the awakeners that appeared due to the recent resurgence of mana. The mutation of awakeners is not as drastic as yours. Plus, one thing they have in common is primordial runes inside their soul dimension. Where is yours? Damn it, thought Charles. He told himself repeatedly to calm down. As he felt his heartbeat, he also tried his best to control himself and reduce the frequency. For all he knew, the agent had a spell to hear it. I don't know, my mutation must be unique, he replied calmly. Is that so? Then, what kind of ability did you get? I'm not very sure. All I know is that I appeared to be smarter. A lot of things I previously did not understand became easier. I could absorb knowledge at a faster rate. That would explain why you spent 2 weeks in the library and the sudden qualification to reach tier 2, commented Amir. I will ask you a few questions. Please answer truthfully. Are you Charles Wentworth? Yes, I am. Are you a spy sent to infiltrate the Empire? No. Do you mean any harm to the Empire and its people? No. Who is beyond your sudden change? My awakened talent and nothing else. Amir looked him straight in the eyes for a good minute without blinking, and Charles stared back without removing his eyes. Then, the agent calmly stood up from his chair and walked out. He soon walked to a room full of holographic screens. How is it? The equipment indicates he is telling the truth, replied Agent Naya. He might be innocent. This is not enough to acquit him. Since he is immune to Veritaserum, he could also be immune to our truth-detecting enchantments. True. Where are the new results? Amir already searched through Charles's mind and soul. But, he did not like the result and wanted more accurate information. So, he requested the test be conducted with more advanced equipment. Under normal circumstances, this would not be possible, at least not so easily. But with the war, many things have become easier to accomplish. They have not arrived yet, she replied. Amir nodded before looking at a video recording of Charles's actions for the past month. Look, pointed Naya. I see it. They found an anomaly when he was in the library. After taking a nap, he woke up all confused about his surrounding. Then, he screamed in pain while holding his head. What did he mutter? Naya typed a few buttons in the air keyboard before they heard Charles say, I'm not dead. What about after that? There is no sound. And his lips cannot be read from the angle. Amir frowned as he knew this was the result of a poor quality camera. University students have protested the lack of privacy in certain campus areas. And a concession was made not to spy on students' private study areas. However, some cameras were still needed if students destroyed the library's public properties or tried to do illegal things inside these rooms. However, the camera's quality was subpar compared to the current Empire's standard. After that, nothing odd appeared in the recordings until Charles hurried to search for something on his watch. The technology of the watch is designed for only the owner to see the screens, so the camera cannot see anything. However, Naya had high-level access, so she pulled out Charles's search history. This kid is really suspicious, she commented. The history indicates Charles looked up information about the royal family, specific individuals who had great powers in the Empire, and the history of the old era. In her career as a counterintelligence agent, she has caught many people whose soul was taken over by foreign life forms. And usually, their next step of action is to use the web to search for basic information about the Empire. Ding! The results are in, Naya said as she opened the new file. According to the result, the mutation in his soul, mana, and aura is rapidly reverting to the original state on our data. This could mean the body possession spell used on him is very advanced. And after a while, our system would not be able to detect anything, and the spy could live as Charles, said Amir. It could also mean the mutation was only temporary, and things will revert to normal, said Naya to play devil's advocate. This was not the first time they had experienced a case like that. Look out for this anomaly, he pointed to a spot on the data. After reading, Naya frowned as it was regarding Charles's memory. Their equipment could not read his memories, this was another part of his unnatural immunity. However, they detected a fluctuation indicating that Charles had received many memories in the past few weeks. And this was another indicator of people whose bodies were possessed. Submit the evidence. Naya typed something, and the two waited. About 5 minutes later, they received a notification, approved. A slight smile appeared on Amir's stoic face for the first time. His department has many restrictions to prevent corruption and abuse of power. One of them is that they have to submit evidence to an artificial intelligence that will analyze the information and determine if there is enough evidence to treat a suspect as a foreign spy. And once he receives the approval notice, he can treat Charles as a spy and not care about his rights. With his calm demeanor, he walked back to the interrogation room. Charles Wentworth, you are under arrest for espionage. What? There is no evidence to prove that, EEO. See. No, we have plenty of evidence. No, I recommend you cooperate to get a more lenient sentence. If not. Charles gritted his teeth, his eyes almost burning in flame. If not, you will get a taste of the torture chambers. I will get the information one way or the other. Charles opened his mouth and closed it, he then repeated the process 3 times before closing them for good. This is not good. I need a way to get out of this situation. His mind worked rapidly as he thought of a feasible way to escape the situation. My ability. Maybe it can send me back 24 hours into the past. This was a far-fetched idea, but he wanted to try since this might be his last chance at survival. So, Charles closed his eyes, an act that put Amir on guard. Charles suddenly felt like everything was spinning as if he was in a washing machine. After what felt like an eternity, everything stopped, and he slowly opened his eyes. He found himself in the library just finishing his last book. He did not react but calmly looked at the time on his watch. It worked, he thought. I'm back to before I was suspected as a spy. Chapter 375, Time Lord. Charles sat at his desk, thinking about his next course of action. There were too many places in the Empire that required mana or soul identification, including the library he was in. As such, if he left, he could not return. He could go to the cafeteria and some buildings, but most classes also required identification. Labs and even soul linking in a virtual reality cabin for his classes also needed identification. If he left the university, he would also be restricted. Public transport did not require such strict identification, but that was before the war. Charles did not have a private vehicle since he was saving, and there was no need for it. As for buying one now, that would also require proper identification. He could not leave the planet since most passenger spaceships were strictly controlled. And the warp portals were even more strict in who was allowed to use them. Do I really have to reveal my identity? Thought Charles for a few minutes before deciding otherwise. He went on to pick up many books on the soul. His best option was to find a way to hide the mutation in his soul. He spent the next 2 hours reading the book since he had to wait for his ability to cool down before he could use it again. Once it was time, Charles activated it and increased his mastery of the content. However, he frowned. I will barely scratch the soul's surface with the available knowledge. He knew it would be impossible to hide his mutation unless he became an expert on the soul. He clenched his hands because of the frustration. Charles then took a deep breath to calm down, knowing his every action could lead to imprisonment. My best bet is to find a way to leave the Empire's territory. Although surviving in the current chaos is dangerous, it's better than being discovered. With my talent, as long as I have enough time. Knowledge is vital to any magic class. And typically, it would be difficult for Charles to get his hands on it. After all, he knew how the nobles controlled knowledge on the planet he was from. However, in the chaotic situation of the galaxy, it was easier to acquire knowledge through crooked ways. I need to get access to the black market. Charles did not know whether a black market existed. However, there was no perfect utopia. The Empire had to have its dark side, its shadow. Maybe he could find a way to leave the planet from the black market. Before leaving, I need to study as much as possible. Charles wanted to take advantage of the situation and absorbed all the knowledge in the library possible. He was even prepared to ask some students from Bigu pills from the Chinese region. Bigu pill was a product of alchemy loved by many low-level arcanists that still required food to function. Mainly tier 4 and below, since tier 5 and above arcanists did not need to eat as their mana could sustain them. One pill could prevent 2 weeks without food. Although spending over a month in the library would bring him some attention, Charles decided to take the risk. He only needed to play his cards correctly and stop at an opportune moment before leaving the school. As for his destination, it was the low-tech area. He would hide there before searching for the black market. Having made a plan, Charles sighed in relief before beginning his study. Regrettably, something suddenly changed. The library's room suddenly became darker, and the environment resembled mirrors. Charles's face changed as he remembered seeing something similar. It was from the Doctor Strange movie he watched back on Earth. The mirror dimension? Charles did not have time to think as he saw 6 individuals standing before him. They had black magic robes with a clock symbol. Furthermore, the person in the lead was a weird alien creature similar to E.T. Oddly, Charles felt the creature was familiar but could not currently remember where he saw it. Charles Wentworth asked the creature. "That's me. Can I know who you are and what's your purpose?" "Kidnapping a citizen of the Empire is a severe crime," replied Charles with a slightly trembling tone, as if he was scared. "We are the Time Auror, protectors of the Empire's timeline," replied the creature from the Novad race. "You are under arrest under the suspicions of tampering with time." "Damn it," cursed Charles. Has this man even taken preventive measures against time travelers? He could not accept that he could not escape even by using his ability to travel back in time. "I think you have the wrong person. I have nothing to do with time magic." "No, how could a weak arcanist like myself have anything to do with time magic?" "You don't have to deny it," replied the Novad. "Our equipment has already detected you. Plus, I can see the spatial temporal aura emanating from your body. Now, whether you accomplish this feat with your power or use a magical treasure, we will decide this after your capture." All the other Aurors took a battle position with their staff ready. "Revert time, revert time, revert time," screamed Charles inside his mind. Unfortunately, his cheat ability could not work consecutively, and he needed a lot of time to recharge. Ultimately, the Time Aurors took Charles to a unique prison that could prevent him from using his time powers. The moment Charles entered the cell, he could sense his ability could not work even on books. So, he had to wait a few minutes before someone took him to another room full of machines and hooked him to them. "What are you doing to me?" asked Charles. Then, an old arcanist with white hair came to talk to him. "We are just reading the remnant time energy from your body to see the events that occurred before you returned to this period." "You can do that?" asked Charles, scared and worried. "Of course," the older man replied with a smile. "I love receiving people like you." "What do you mean?" "Changing past events should not be possible. If someone goes back in time to change events, they would only create a parallel universe where things have changed. After that person returned to their timeline, nothing would have changed. You understand?" "I do. The newly created timeline is where things have changed," Charles replied. "Exactly. But some unique time magic allows people to change the past without creating a new timeline. They can rewrite reality with their actions. We call these people Time Lords, and you are one of them. Since the creation of the Time Aura Department, we have captured 12 Time Lords, and you're the 13th, Onui. CM. Charles opened his mouth, shocked beyond words. For the first time, he felt the profound horror and background of this empire that has not existed for 100 years. And he felt jealous of the Arcane Emperor's achievements. He also felt regretful he was born in this place as he had no chance to survive, let alone rise. "Everything is ready," said someone from the back, and the old man nodded to Charles before leaving. Then, the machines worked for a few minutes before showing Charles's life before he traveled back in time. Everything looked normal until the library accident where he first transmigrated. Unlike the intelligence department, the Time Aurors could perfectly hear what Charles muttered after he first reincarnated. "I'm not dead? Better yet, I've been reincarnated in a world of sword and magic?" "Reincarnation? Now, things are getting interesting." "I wonder where he is from," said the older man. "He could be from anywhere in our universe, from another dimension, plane, or parallel timeline," replied another researcher. "The possibilities are endless." "That's true," replied the older man as he continued the event of Charles's capture and his subsequent arrest as a spy before he reverted time. "This person's situation is more complicated than expected since he is not a normal Time Lord. Send the information to the royal family and let them decide what to do with him." One of the researchers then sent the information gathered directly to Commander Olivier. Their department was an unknown one to the public that directly served the royal family and could directly report to them. Not even a minute after sending the information, they received the notification that one of the Empress would arrive immediately to deal with the situation. On a more personal note, I also wanted to ask for your help. As many of you know, I'm currently pursuing my education, and it can be a real challenge to balance schoolwork and creating content for this channel. If you found my videos helpful or inspiring, I would be incredibly grateful if you could consider making a donation to help me continue my education. Even a small contribution can make a big difference, and it would mean the world to me.